Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Virginia for the 2025 Midwest Industrial Transformation Initiative Stakeholder Forum. I'm Jamie Alexander. I'm Director of External Affairs at the Natural Resources Research Institute at the University of Minnesota. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It is amazing to look out here and see so many different people from different parts of our community. So we have leaders from industry, community, Native nations, labor, state and local government, and more. And we're here because this region, the Iron Range, has delivered time and again for the nation, providing the iron that literally built America. And we can do it again. We can lead the way toward the next generation of clean, competitive, and resilient industry. What we do here can show the country what's possible when we come together. We are honored to have several Minnesota state legislators with us today, as well as representatives from the offices of Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith, and Congressman Stauber. If any elected officials in the room, would you stand if you're comfortable with that and be recognized? So today's about exploring what's possible. In terms of an agenda, we'll start by grounding in the context of the region and sort of some of the challenges and the current reality facing the region. And then we'll look ahead toward what's possible if we do this transition well. We'll hear from industry and community leaders. We'll engage in panels and interactive discussions. And then we'll end the day by hearing from some exciting ventures that are happening across the state and the country that are working to accelerate this transformation. But before we dive in, a quick housekeeping note. Restrooms, hopefully everyone has found them down the hall. Emergency exits are out to the right. And a number of NRI staff are in the room. So if you need anything at all today, just let us know. I want to thank our sponsors, the Minnesota Department of Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation and the U.S. Energy Foundation for their support. And thanks to our collaborators and partners who are in the room today. You're going to hear from a lot of them throughout the day. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone who embodies the spirit of collaboration and progress right here in our host community. Mayor Larry Cuffey has dedicated his career to serving Virginia. First through more than 3 decades in law enforcement and now as mayor. Under his leadership, the city has remained a strong and resilient community, helping the Iron Range ensure it continues to thrive and explore new opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Larry Cuffey.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Iron Term Warriors Event Center. This event center was a progress in making for 5 years of long, hard work, and we welcome you here today to explore the new changes that you're looking for in this initiative moving forward. So we have a staff here at the Iron Term Warriors Event Center. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask them. We are here to accommodate you, to give you whatever you need in order to be a successful forum today. The Midwest Industrial Transformation Initiative is a welcome here. I want to say that Virginia has been a solid supporter and a reliance on mining. Mining is the engine that drives our economy in Northeast Minnesota, particularly in Virginia. We have relied on the Iron Term Warriors Event Center. This wouldn't be built if it wasn't for mining. Our entire city wouldn't be vibrant if it wasn't for mining. Our city would have died on the vine if it wasn't for mining, whether it's ferrous mining or whether it's non-ferrous mining. And we can argue whether or not what's safe mining, what's not safe mining. But the bottom line is NRRI is an important piece of this. Having you here today in this forum to discuss all the initiatives that are moving forward about saving our industry. Yes, our population relies on the largest employer in Virginia's healthcare. But if it wasn't for the mining industry, we would not exist. We wouldn't have the facilities we have today. We wouldn't have a new public safety facility. We wouldn't have this facility. We wouldn't have what we have today as a result of that. Our population was at 15,500 at one point in time. But because of the strong government regulations moving forward and the mining has shrunk and employee groups, we are now a population of 8,340 people. And we don't want to go any lower than that. We want to ensure that mining is a long-term investor in our community. If we can't grow it, if we can't dig it, if we can't build it, or we can't manufacture it, what are we doing here? Our communities will die. I see a lot of you in the communities that cook, eat all over, where we all rely on this. Our legislators that are present today, the mining industry with New Range, United States Steel, Cleveland Cliffs, all these mining companies, Metaba Metallics, New Range. I mean, it's an important piece as we move forward. So if we don't have the desire, the dedication, the discipline, the determination to move forward and save our community in Northeast Minnesota and find innovative ways in which to ensure that mining is a long-term investment here in Virginia, Minnesota, and throughout the Tax Beef area in Northeast Minnesota. So I'm looking forward to a productive and informative forum today. Today's newspaper says, big, huge, in the Wasabi Tribune, Minnesota manufacturers reveal concerns in a survey. Government regulations, taxes, tariffs, and the loss of mining jobs is just this one article in the newspaper that came out today. And last week, if you haven't seen the big mining sector in Virginia, Minnesota, that's why mining is so important here today. So it is an honor, privilege to be here today. And so it's an emotional thing for me. And I want to thank you for being here today and being in Virginia, Minnesota to talk about this issue. We have a mayor's meeting across the hall, and RAMS, the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools, is here today. And so we have a mayor's meeting to talk about this as well. So it is my honor and my privilege, and I'm pleased to introduce to you today Dr. Rolf Rieberg, Executive Director of the Natural Resource Research Institute. Rolf's career includes a 25-year career in the industry, has focused on research that drives innovation, advances sustainable industry, and strengthens our communities. Under his leadership, NRRI has become a national model for turning science into real-world impact. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rolf Rieberg. Good to see you again, sir. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a beautiful morning out here in Virginia, Minnesota. Thank you for the kind introduction, Mayor Cuffey. It's great to be back here in Virginia. Home to a great community. Home on the Iron Range. It's the home of the state's tallest bridge, if you didn't drive over it today. And of course, it's the ancestral home of our Indigenous colleagues that are also in the room with us today. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome each of you to today's discussion, an update about the future of Minnesota and the region, our impacts on the nation, and our potential impacts on the global community. It's that big. What we do today and tomorrow, next week, next year is important to do it together, and it matters. We have a collective, unique opportunity here to make a difference. That's where we want to kind of set the table with those comments. The world we live in, this little blue ball in the middle of absolutely nothing, has finite resources and ecosystems we all depend upon. We know this. Human demand is depleting those resources. We know this. We need to innovate, to use less, reuse what we have, reduce our impacts through creation of new energy sources, process technologies, and new sources of materials to serve the triple bottom line economic model: people, planet, profit. translated to mutually robust communities, environment, and economies, plural. Regions that pursue these integrated goals will define and will participate in the sustained economy of the future, one that has a growing interconnected portfolio of global products, good jobs, strong communities, and healthy environments. That's setting the table. So what are we doing here in Virginia? We've had these conversations all over. It's important to be here in Virginia, as we said earlier. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Energy partners recognized that Minnesota is nationally unique. Nationally unique, we'll talk about that today, in having the resources, the infrastructure, and the expertise to function as a demonstration site for industrial transformation. Enhanced energy availability and efficiency, reduced carbon footprint, environmental stewardship, strong communities, all while promoting globally competitive products across multiple cross-sector coupled industries. That's a big goal. That's a big vision. Cross-coupled industries are industries that are either co-located or otherwise linked to take mutual advantage of energy and material resources, utilize waste streams, drive efficiencies, and minimize impacts. The centerpiece is the national steel and iron industry. It's the centerpiece, it's the flywheel. With the recognition that Minnesota furnishes 85% of the iron for the domestic steel industry. It's a big number, it's a big responsibility. And then reduction of carbon emissions from this industry could make a significant global impact. There's the stake. The MITI vision, almost exactly 2 years ago today, in a summit held at the University of Minnesota Minneapolis campus, a team introduced the vision which has become the Midwest Industrial Transformation Initiative, better known as MITI. For those of you that say MITI, out of here. Wow. Some of you were there. In fact, I see a number of faces of people that were there. Welcome back. It grew from a collaboration between the University of Minnesota's Natural Resources Research Institute, the West Central Research Outreach Center in Morris, Minnesota, US DOE National Laboratory Partners, and the Great Lakes Institute. The MITI vision was designed to leverage broad government, industry, and community partnerships to de-risk investment into transformation of American bedrock industries, from renewable energy and hydrogen all the way to advanced products, starting with iron and steel as a foundation. Therefore, it seems entirely appropriate to come to Iron Country here today, Mayor Cuffey, to engage in a statewide stakeholder conversation to update this conversation. MITI has made significant progress. New partnerships have been forged, research programs have progressed, and installation of experimental facilities are on target. We have engaged communities across the state and built on their questions and feedback to improve this effort. Of course, recent changes in the federal government have created significant uncertainty in planning, support, and execution. However, new funding pathways are emerging right now. But throughout, the MITI effort has been and remains aligned with national priorities of energy security, globally competitive industry, and management of critical materials. Globally competitive industry requires thorough product lifecycle assessments to gain access to global markets. It's a fact. Meaning that these products are assessed to ensure environmental and community benefits in the long term. Any vision, and the MITI vision is no exception, is a long-term view of the possible. An invitation to imagine and drive a different reality. The MITI vision seeks to reduce risk by accelerating research and demonstration efforts to drive investment in these bedrock fundamental industries. Cross-sector coupling is a big piece of this and is a bold approach. This is a global focus on doing something other people aren't doing to achieving these goals. The vision is a challenge it takes courage to pursue. It's usually uncomfortable and frankly a little bit scary. Out of the comfort zone. I'll admit I'm uncomfortable. You should be too. But that's okay. We do understand, however, that the status quo is not going to change the regional economy, drive national competitiveness, or help us address any global challenges. This vision seeks to make Minnesota resources relevant to emerging technologies around the nation, not just here, and serve as a national example of what coupling can do. Achieving the vision requires broad ownership and collaboration. It doesn't belong to NRI. It doesn't belong to the US Steel. It doesn't belong to Virginia. It cannot be dominated by one interest, whether you are a generational miner, a forester, a venture capitalist, an entrepreneur, tribal or community member, government and agency employee, elected official, energy provider, or for God's sake, a science nerd. All are needed. A vision is not a silver bullet. We often look for those, nor is it a guarantee of success. A vision is never realized by accident. It takes a lot of coordinated, coordinate's a big word, cooperative, hard work from a team without individual heroes. Somebody just fell asleep over here. The path to achieving a vision is never linear. I've never seen anything linear. If anybody has, I'd love to talk to you. The effort must be agile to adjust to multiple variables, including failure. We can't be afraid of failure. Failure is just an opportunity to take the next bold step, learn quickly, and adjust direction toward that shared goal. In the same way, investment in research and demonstration to reduce risk is not a guarantee of success. Neither is it a hole in the ground you throw money in. It is an educated bet on the future. The only guarantee I can give you is that not investing will ensure you don't have a choice. So we're here to invest. MITI seeks to make that bet here in Minnesota and to demonstrate an advanced industrial ecosystem interlaced with our natural ecosystems, their many services, and our communities. The desired outcome of today is to listen, develop a shared understanding, and imagine how to engage. The stakes are high, as you will hear, but the opportunities to do something significant are even higher. If we are unwilling to take the chance together, the effort is more important than any one of us. Future generations are looking to us to carve the path forward despite the challenges. They're always going to be there. Now, as we come together today, each of us brings our personal concerns, understanding, and beliefs about the world we live in. These might include jobs, the environment, food, public health, water quality, tribal rights, energy, climate impacts, or Minnesota's sense of place, among many others. Whatever concerns and interests you bring, you belong here. It's all important. So let's be gracious, seek to understand in context, view the opportunity, and determine where you can help build it up. So let's connect, knock down the silos. I never met one that solved the problem. Imagine what's possible and have some fun thinking about that common future. I'd like to thank the growing team, I like the word team, of MITI partners, without whose support and commitment we wouldn't be doing this and will continue to help us do this. It's critical to the effort as we move forward together. And thanks to each of you for coming to beautiful Virginia, committing your time and energy to learn more about the MITI effort, engage and provide your comments and input because we all need it. The tent is wide, the doors are open, and the goals of future economy, one that sustains strong communities and healthy environment. Let's do this. All right, thank you. Let's have a great day.
Thank you, Rolf, and thank you, Mary Puffy, for that inspiring welcome. We're now going to move into a series of presentations. The first one will ground us in current trends shaping production in the region. Please join me in welcoming Jason Yanish. Jason serves as Energy, Mining, and Climate Policy Advisor with the Minnesota Department of Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, and he brings deep insight into the iron and steel sector and the evolving in northeastern Minnesota. He'll walk us through key iron and steel making production trends, market considerations, and why this moment matters for not just the region, but the state and the country. Welcome, Jason.
Good morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So when Jamie and Rolf first approached me about speaking at the event, they really asked me to come in and provide some economic context and an economic outlook and forecast for the region. I thought, hey, great opportunity. A great opportunity for me to be completely wrong in front of hundreds of people, right? Like economic forecasting the iron and steel industry is a complicated process in stable times. There's experts out there that do that. They look at automotive production and oil and gas production, and they look at new home starts and industrial construction, and how all those pull on the demand for steel, and that pulls on the demand for iron. And that's in stable times. But what we're dealing with now is very much different than stable. It's complex, it's chaotic. Who would have thought 6 years ago that Cleveland Cliffs would have bought AK Steel and then ArcelorMittal USA and turned from being an iron ore merchant supplier to one of the biggest steel makers in the United States? And then who would have thought 3 years ago that US Steel would put itself up for sale and Nippon would buy it and offer to invest $13 billion into the US steel industry? And what changes is that going to bring? And who would have thought a year ago, that we'd be talking about trade and tariffs, and we would be talking about 600 of our fellow miners being laid off from Menorca and hitting taconite? And guys, who would have thought 4 weeks ago we would have been talking about POSCO, a Korean steelmaker, one of the biggest in the world, making a major investment in Cleveland Cliffs? Like how do you take all of that with all the normal cyclical things that are happening in the iron and steel industry and put that into a forecast that you can stand up here with confidence and put forward? And I can't. So I'm not going to try to. I decided to pick two different topics, and I'm going to call them history and geography. They feel a lot more safe to me. I'm going to be talking about what has happened, but it has relevance into our iron ore demand, and hopefully it'll provide some insight into sort of what we have ahead of us and why some of the changes that we are seeing are happening. So that's my goal today. I've got like 14 minutes left to do that, so hang on, we're going to move fast. We're going to cover things at a high level. I'll be around to take some questions later, and we'll hopefully have a little bit of Q&A after this as well. So, but really we have evolved on the iron range over time, right? So evolutions in our technologies aren't new to us. Originally we were digging ore out of the ground, shipping it directly to blast furnaces and turning that into steel. And when that direct shipping ore was depleted, it took inventive people from industry and academia, the University of Minnesota, and the government to come together to figure out, what do we do when the natural ore runs out? How do we take advantage of all the taconite, low-grade iron ore here to keep Minnesota viable, to keep the steel industry in the U.S. viable? And we invented the taconite process, and we've built the taconite plants, and we've operated them successfully to the benefit of the region for the last 50 years. So what we have in front of us now really isn't a shift in sort of the mining side of things, but we have a shift in the steelmaking side of things. So the consumers of those iron ores, how steel is being made in the United States is shifting, and that has an impact on the demand for our iron ore. And specifically what I'm talking about is the rise of electric arc furnace as the primary steelmaking technology in the United States, and sort of the subsequent decline in the amount of steel being made from blast furnaces. And why that's important is this: our iron ore primarily feeds blast furnaces, right? This is data from the U.S. Geological Survey. I just put into a graphical form. But for every ton of steel made in a blast furnace, it takes about 1.3 tons of iron ore. So there's a really direct link between our iron ore going to blast furnaces to be made into steel. Electric arc furnaces use scrap as a primary raw material input. It was a really pretty good chart. All right. So electric arc furnaces conversely use scrap as a primary input. They do use some virgin iron metallics that can come from iron ores, but it's primarily a scrap-based technology. The blast furnace takes iron ore, combines it with coking coal. It's a chemical reaction in addition to a melting. The oxygen is stripped off of the iron ore, and we're left with molten iron at the bottom. An electric arc furnace is much more like lightning in a bottle. It takes recycled scrap steel, some virgin iron that's already metallic, and it remelts it. So it's very much a remelting furnace as opposed to a reaction furnace. And so the technologies are very, very different. Now, what's driving some of those changes are up on the table here, and I'm not going to read them to you, and they vary over time, right? The one thing that you will notice over that last slide was that was a 20-year time period that time change has been happening. The actual change has been happening for longer than that. The change has been happening for the last 50 years as electric arc furnace technology has come into being and grown in its ability to make higher and higher grades of steel. So originally what was happening is the availability of low-cost scrap, low-cost energy, and an ability to make steel very, very competitively was the advantage of an electric arc furnace. And at that time, there were some technical limitations where they could make sort of, I'll call it low quality steel. Please don't be offended. I'm not a metallurgist, but they could make like things like rebar. That really is a solid stock. It doesn't need to be that pure, but they can make it really cheaply, really effectively. The cost to build an electric arc furnace, they're often called mini mills, so they can be much smaller. You don't have to invest, billions of dollars to build a mini mill. You can build a small steelmaking furnace. You can turn it off. You can turn it on. You can make small batches really, really well. And over time, EAFs have progressed in their ability to make greater and greater quantities and greater qualities of steel, that's in competing with the blast furnaces. So they have lower capital costs to begin with. They are generally lower intensity on both labor and emissions. So I've seen some statistics that suggest that to make a ton of steel with an electric arc furnace, it takes about 12 minutes of labor per ton of steel that are made. That compares to 2 hours of labor that are needed with a blast furnace. So blast furnaces are really, really good at making massive quantities of really pure iron and really pure steel, right? So there's a place for both in our market. It's just as electric arc furnaces have increased their ability, they seem to be the preferred method of making steel. The emission side of things more recently is driving things, so sort of environmental concerns. A ton of steel made with a blast furnace emits about 2 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel. And an electric arc furnace, you can drive that close to zero, but sort of 0.3 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel. So in more recent times, that's been a driver in the technological switch as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about where iron ore fits into both steelmaking technologies, because it does have a place in both. And so this is a little pictogram. On top, we see the blast furnace iron in steelmaking, where blast furnace pellets go to a blast furnace, get made into molten iron, and continue on in the process. And on the bottom, on the electric arc side, you see scrap steel going into an electric arc furnace, and then going on into the steelmaking process. And I primarily wanted to use this to talk about DR pellets and DRI, just to try to do some level setting as to what that is. And so DR pellets are an iron oxide pellet. They're made from iron ore. They're a little higher grade as far as iron content, so 68% iron versus maybe a 65% iron. But more importantly, they're lower silica. So a typical pellet that goes into a blast furnace might have 5% silica. That blast furnace can reject that silica in this process very, very well. A DR pellet has 2% or less of silica because it just doesn't have a method in the electric arc furnace to eliminate that. But basically, those DR pellets, in order to be used in an electric arc furnace, need to go through a supplemental process, an intermediate process called a direct reduced iron furnace, right? So that iron oxide pellet goes to a DRI furnace where it's turned into metallic iron, and then that metallic iron can feed an electric arc furnace. So there is a pathway for Minnesota ore to feed the electric arc furnace. It's hinged on the direct reduced iron furnace today, and you guys will hear later that maybe it could be hinged on other technologies in the future. And then just to drive home the point of what's done in Minnesota currently and what's not, certainly we do the mining and create the pellets in Minnesota. The rest of that value stream is downstream today. We love, and it's been the vision of the desire of the Iron Range to pull more of that into Minnesota. We're hopeful we can do that in the future. I find it helpful. I find all of this really confusing. I've just spent a lot of time studying, and I apologize if I'm going a little bit too deep, but pictures help me. So these are pictures that help. On the left, you see a picture of direct reduced iron. So it very much looks like a taconite pellet. It's just chemically been converted from an iron oxide to metallic iron. In the middle, you see a hot briquetted iron, which is basically those DRI pellets that have been formed into a shape, but they're very similar chemically. And then you have pig iron, which is also a feedstock. These are primary feedstocks that can be put into electric arc furnaces as well. So these are the pathways for Minnesota ore to sort of feed that electric arc furnace market. Just wanted to give you guys that visual. So this picture is a little reinterpretation of that first one. And what this is showing, instead of a percentage of steel made in a blast furnace or electric arc furnace, it's showing the actual tons. And to me, that's a little bit more informative for us today. So what you see in that dark blue line is how the tons of iron that are made in a blast furnace have declined over the last 20 years. And that green line are the iron units from Minnesota's iron ore. And what you can see is that the amount of iron made in the blast furnace has declined to a point where it's reached sort of our capacity of iron ore. And so further declines in blast furnaces are likely going to have an impact on our demand for iron ore. And this ignores the fact that Michigan makes taconite pellets as well, right? So they make about 8 million tons of pellets a year, which is about 5 million tons of iron. And so there, at least on the Great Lakes, appears to be an excess of iron ore available. But it's interesting to think about this. In the United States today, we import about 3 million tons of iron ore from countries like Sweden and Brazil and Eastern Canada. We import about 1 million tons of direct reduced iron a year. We import 6 million tons of pig iron a year into the United States. So 10 million tons of iron is being imported, and yet we've got taconite plants that are closed down and being throttled back. And so there's a couple of things that matter. We talked about one before, and that's we need direct reduced iron furnaces. I'll show you in a minute that we don't have enough direct reduced iron capacity in the United States currently. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the geography lesson for today, and that is that location matters. So this is a picture showing where the blast furnaces in the United States are located. You'll see they're clustered around the Great Lakes. There's a really codependent relationship between our iron mines and those blast furnaces. They're typically owned by the same companies. They're vertically integrated. They're connected by Great Lakes, which is a fantastic economic way, both environmentally to ship and then from a cost perspective to ship iron ore. So there's a really, just a really sweet economic codependency that exists. What also we struggle with, though, is this idea that if we're not shipping on the Great Lakes and we have to ship our ore via rail or other methods, it gets really expensive really fast. And that in the southern United States, it's actually cheaper to import iron ore from overseas than transport it up rivers and things of that to address the market than it is for us to ship it from Minnesota. I've heard it said that it's cheaper to ship from Australia to Louisiana a boatload of iron ore than it is for us to get iron ore from Minnesota down to Louisiana as well. Now, that's not entirely true. There are companies here that do ship to the port of Louisiana, that do ship to Mexico, but it comes at a pretty high premium. And as the world gets more and more competitive for iron ore, the ability to make a dollar doing that gets tougher and tougher. So geography matters as well in terms of changes in blast furnaces. So you saw that trend of blast furnaces declining. So blast furnaces have closed. And so this is just an image to show the states where those blast furnaces have closed. So they are coupled around the Great Lakes. That circle is Canada, Algoma. That's either closed or announced to close. About 20 million tons in the last 10 years have been announced to close on the blast furnace side of things. And it's being replaced almost in kind, ton for ton, with electric arc furnaces. And these are the states where the electric arc furnaces are being built. Right? So the geography is shifting, and the new steel making is moving a little bit further south, making it a little bit harder for iron ore to get there competitively. And the last piece I'll talk about is about direct reduced iron plants. And so these are also have been built primarily in the last 15 years. And they're certainly Cliffs Toledo built a plant on the Great Lakes, which uses Minnesota iron ore. And then the plants, Nucor and ArcelorMittal are on the Gulf Coast, and they use imported iron ore to feed their plants. And then a little bit concerning are a number of new projects that are being announced to build DRI in the United States, but all on the Gulf Coast so far, right? Those are the announcements that we're hearing. That's about 6 million additional tons of iron ore that's going to be built, that's announced to be built. Whether they happen or not, who knows? SSAB used to be on this list. They pulled away from their project. So will these come to fruition or not? But the point is that as global investment thinks about DRI in the United States, they're thinking about the Gulf Coast as a possible location. To confuse things a little bit, but to provide complete context, I just threw this picture up. So this is it all together, right? So this is all the EAFs. This is from 2023, but it's EAFs in the United States, the blast furnaces, the iron mines, and DRI plants. But it just gives you context that it is dispersed, it is distributed. There are EAFs within our geographic ability to hit. So that is a quick overview. But the point I want to drive home is this: is that that we're in another time of disruption and transition. We have seen blast furnaces decline. The blast furnaces that are remaining are some of the most competitive blast furnaces in the United States. There's a need for them. They make ore when they're running full out and make steel running full out very, very well, very, very competitively. They serve a need to make the purest iron and the purest high strength steels out there, right? And so we've taken a little bit of a decline, but we're not going to take blast furnaces to zero. That's not envisioned at all. We are seeing a rise in electric arc furnaces. In that, there is an opportunity for Minnesota ore. Right, as more and more electric arc furnaces come online, there's a bigger demand for steel for scrap. That becomes a little bit more scarce. That price goes up, and also a bigger demand for these virgin iron ore metallics to make high grade steel. So there's a need for these DRIs and HBIs and pig irons. It's just how do we in Minnesota use our iron ore to feed those markets? What do we do now to make that happen? And so really, and we're also going to hear about just massive investments in new technologies to make iron and steel. And so it's hard to see what's going to happen 10 or 15 years out because we might not be talking about electric arc furnaces. We might be talking about very different ways of using our iron ore to make these iron products. And so really, I put this up there to say, listen, we've been through these challenging times before. If we have an idea and understand sort of where we sit in the world and what forces are at play, it can be empowering for us to figure out where do we invest our time and our money and our resources to really build a future that's brighter for us. And so I don't know if I hit 15 minutes. I'm gonna leave it there, but that's what I offer for you. Be glad to visit with you guys later about it. There's much more to chat about. But Rolf, I guess I'd like to kick it back over to you to jump into some more about MITI if we could here. So thank you very much.
Okay, unfortunately for you, I'm back. What we'd like to do, and I think, thank you, Jason, that was a fantastic summary. A lot of information in there that, and everything we're going to talk about today, we could probably spend an hour talking about each one of those topics. And it would be exciting, but we'd all be asleep by early afternoon. But I think one of the takeaways we just heard, and it's something I heard from a mentor a long time ago, and every challenge, there's an opportunity if we're willing to look for it and join together to go after it. And when we think about what we just heard, the focus is how do we get to higher value materials? Because higher value materials have markets. And we think about those kinds of path forwards. That's the bridge to what we're trying to talk about with the MITI effort. So what I want to do with my colleagues today is provide an overview, an update of what's happening with MITI, what are the new things we've been doing. It's not going to be an exhaustive review, don't worry. I won't even put any molecular structures up here for you to look at. But we really want to share the sharing of the focus, the activities, the progress, and again, as I said earlier, an invitation to engage. So, should put that up there. Anyway, when we get to the MITI vision is pretty simple. Is to really demonstrate and de-risk how we transition these bedrock American industries to a new future. It's going to take innovation and demonstration. We got to get to that de-risking point so people have the confidence that it does. We have to be keeping our eyeball on what's that global competitiveness look like. Jason just shared that blast furnace pellets need to be upgraded to something else to be globally competitive. And most importantly, what's the expanded regional opportunity? Do we want to have the jobs here? Do we want to see our kids go somewhere else for a job? Do we want to develop the region into the powerhouse it should be? That's in a microcosm what the vision and the purpose of MITI really is. As I said earlier, in November, 2 years ago, we had a shared vision of what industrial decarbonization would look like at the time and what cross-coupled industry could possibly offer to that conversation. In those conversations, we showed a map that looked a lot like this, where the Department of Energy six laboratories were doing some studies looking at where could we do something about making something called green iron and green steel. What would they be looking for? They'd be looking for energy. They'd be looking for resources. They'd be looking for places to store hydrogen, because hydrogen was at the point where we were looking at hydrogen as a major driver. Where's the expertise? Where is transportation, the infrastructure? It all came back to Minnesota. That's the truth. The other picture we shared with you was a initial look at what an industrial ecosystem might look like. How can we tie together energy generation, hydrogen, and the industry of iron and steel, cement and concrete, ammonia, and e-fuels? All of these also have offtake in the region. Clearly, iron and steel we've talked about. We use a lot of cement and concrete around here. We have a port that uses bunker fuel. We have airports, as well as the 148th Fighter Squadron that uses SAF. And we have these little trucks running around the range here and there that getting a couple miles per gallon. There's offtake. So that was another big piece of why we came together. We started talking about what the new vision would look like for cross-sector coupling for base industries. Our approach from then through today has been fourfold. Engage is probably the crux, because I've learned long ago in my past life as well as this one, it doesn't matter how good your technology is, or how sexy it is, or even how much money you can make. It's about social acceptance, and if you're really talking about the whole conversation, engaging communities, engaging government, engaging all the stakeholders to get that buy-in. So you spend a lot of time, almost half the time, engaging and listening. Enabling is another piece of this, because we have policies that we need to streamline in order to be able to onboard things at the rate we need to do it. That's not a simple conversation. It's not us against them. It's how do we do this. The demonstrate piece is where NRI and the national labs have a lot of expertise of how can we best work between the private and public sectors to help demonstrate and reduce risk to investment. And inspire is kind of all of our job. How do we engage? How do we talk about this? How do we inspire each other to do the job? So that's kind of a look towards the back, but let's look at where we are today. Clearly, there's a lot of fundamental changes out there, and no point in sugarcoating that. The federal, down to the state, down to the local, and the global scale. Reflecting back out to the global scale. If you read the paper every 10 minutes, you're going to see something about it. There's some uncertainty in terms of changing priorities, funding, markets, economies, etc. The end result of what our focus is that it remains constant. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The key point is right now, things are starting to loosen up. We're starting to see things flow. We're starting to see priorities start to get defined. And the good news is the MITI effort, all of us, is relevant. And that's the takeaway from that point. Iron remains a national issue. We hear about a lot of other things, critical minerals, we hear about rare earths, we hear about fuels, we hear about a lot of other things. So I think we'll come right back to you kind of got to have steel around in order to have an industry. And so really iron is still the flywheel of the work we're doing. And as Jason pointed out, there's some high stakes. How do we do that? How do we make good choices regarding that? And the message is MITI has evolved to accommodate these challenges. It hasn't changed. The vision of the state concept, but we evolved in our emphasis, and that's what we want to share today. A key part of this is that we're 100% aligned with federal priorities. The bold words, I'm not going to read all these to you, but these bold words are the come right out of the vision statement for the U.S. Department of Energy today. It's also things that any past administration, future administration, or present administration is going to want to do. Who's going to argue against having a globally competitive industry? That's a good focal point. So So as we look at critical industry challenges, there are things that stand in the way of industry moving and what gives them the confidence that they should invest. Some of you are in here. Energy. Availability is a big challenge. The state's behind about 8 gigawatts. With all the stuff that's hitting the state, that's a big chunk of energy. Where are we going to get it? How do we distribute it? And how much is it going to cost? When you look at the influx of data centers, they're willing to pay 2 to 3x what an industrial customer can pay because they can do it. That's a challenge. So that's a barrier, if you will, moving forward. There's other barriers to investment. We're talking about with these industrial investments, we're talking about $500 million to start playing for significant change. That's a barrier. That's also a de-risking need. It's also the CapEx, OpEx, offtake. Where's it going to go? Jason just showed you those maps. Where are you going to put that stuff? And of course, policy. How do we do this together in between the public and private sector? And if nothing, not to be ignored, there's legacy impacts in whatever industry you've been part of in any part of the world. Everything we do as humanity has impacts. How do we manage them better? That's always something that has to be front of mind because it comes right back to that social license to operate. What MITI is offering is a regionally integrated effort. All kind of, how do you think about everything at the same time while you're trying to do things well? Engage, we talked about, develop and demonstrate, reduce that risk, drive investment, and retain talent. Though that's just a small vision, a small goal. But if they aren't integrated like that, it's not going to be successful. The key point, though, is we have an opportunity as a state to provide a national example of how to do this. So what's happened? At the beginning of the year, we were awarded, alongside our national laboratory partners, a significant funding from the Department of Energy. But you've been reading the papers, all of those have been terminated. Ours haven't. They've been frozen, and we're anxiously waiting to see how that's going to come back because they are looking at what we're trying to do here in Minnesota as a significant model and part of where they want to go. That's not a guarantee, but it's certainly not a dead issue. We have National Lab Formal Partnership. This is important for the state of Minnesota. Being able to have National Lab presence in the state of Minnesota to help do these things is pivotal. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to work directly with National Labs, but they range anywhere from 3,000 to 50,000 people working on particular things. They're run by the Department of Energy with vast capabilities in data analysis, modeling, and building big things really fast. It's a tool that we now have as part of the state. And it's another acronym you probably want to keep in the back of your mind. I can't remember it, so I wrote it up there. But it's a joint research alliance, innovative materials and advanced critical technologies. Impact. That's a tool, one of many, that we're going to be using together to go after these. There are many emerging advanced iron and steel and related technologies, whether it's ferrous or non-ferrous or carbon-based. Lots of things are coming out. We're having lots of new industries with new opportunities coming in and looking for how they can engage with MITI. The state commitment to carbon neutrality by 2040 is still in front of us. The state is still driving this. Right now, we're as a group with MITI engaging our friends at NBC and other agencies across the state. And how do we think about forming an industrial decarbonization roadmap, industrial transformation roadmap for this state? And it's really important to have a strategic plan so that we can wrap around and start thinking about how do we add to that. And finally, this effort, the MITI effort, really enjoys bipartisan state agency partnerships across the board. Just recently, we were able to deliver a report to the Department of Commerce that outlines the utility of Minnesota iron in high-grade storage batteries. That has boomerang effect on use of iron for other things like magnets and other battery applications that you might see in an EV or like electric vehicle. Expanded opportunity, expanded markets. That's where the iron should be going. We've also been looking at water treatment capabilities as part of the whole conversation with our NPCA partners. This is really important as we think about the whole picture about how we move forward. So a few comments about an update about what are we doing in the demonstrate arena. Now we still have that map. It's a little bit different if you look at it carefully, and if you look in your folders, there's one there for you to look at a little bit more closely. A couple of additions, data centers, they're now part of the landscape. We've got also the ethanol industry, a big piece of that. That's a CO2 source. It's also a piece of what might be, we have agricultural SAF, agricultural ethanol, but now we're talking about cellulosic based, which makes use of our forest resources as well. And so the ecosystem map looks a lot different too, but it's also very much the same. If you look in the lower left, you see our natural resources, iron, critical material ore, mineral ores, forest and agriculture, and water. Those are our natural resources that we're leveraging. That we've expanded to before. Next to that, geologic hydrogen. 2 months ago, we were able to have a summit here in the state talking about the fact that geologic hydrogen is something that could probably happen. It's very early TRL, but that's an energy source that we need to be paying attention to carefully and understanding what those opportunities look like. Energy storage, that's something he's talked about with our pit lakes. Those can also be functioning as batteries, it's part of the composition. Market-driven energy, don't really care. If it's market-driven, we need to have it installed. The energy conversion into hydrogen if we need it, ammonia if we need to store it, and other materials is critical to this picture. But it really hinges on 3 key industries that we're focusing on. One is, of course, iron, advanced iron, and how that fits into either advanced iron products or steel. Critical materials, which of course refer to critical minerals, but critical materials is the economic opportunity we want to have. And of course, fuels and carbon products, all of which interlace. And those carbon products can help us make steel, which is an alloy of iron and carbon, and all the way through managing water impacts and other things. So this is the ecosystem that we're talking about, but note that it has to be working in tandem with our natural ecosystems and our community ecosystems in order to be successful. Coming back to that triple bottom line. So to give you a picture of what, there's been all these changes, what we could possibly be doing, whether we have been maintaining a very detailed portfolio of technologies. And I'm not going to go into detail on these, but I just want to show it so you get an idea of the breadth of some of the conversations we're having around the country, around the globe. In advanced iron and steel alone, focusing on the reduced footprint and expanding that value, yeah, we're still working on taconite, but we're also extending all the way into iron products, powders, steel, and other products all the way to batteries and magnets. Those opportunities are part of the overall conversation in the technologies we're examining together with our national laboratory partners to understand what those opportunities look like. We turn our attention to critical materials. It starts with mineral extraction, impact management, reclamation from the waste streams we have today as well, creating advanced concentrates and ultimately materials and components that are needed in EVs, for example. The other path, of course, is fuels and carbon products. Start with thermal energy just by burning things, but go all the way to CO2 capture, liquid fuels. As I said earlier, we have that offtake. Looking at how these 3 sectors can intersect with the underpinnings of the geologic hydrogen, energy storage, etc. That's the picture, and how data centers may or may not be a part of that. Because data centers, while they are able to buy the energy, they create a lot of heat. That's an off product we can use. So think about it from that point of view. So what we are driving as MITI is how do we work between the public and private sector, particularly with NRI and our national laboratory partners to model this. Because if you look at all the permutations on there, we go insane trying to do that and demonstrate all of that. It's impossible. But by using AI and machine learning and coupling our various capabilities from across the country, where we might digitally link energy generation at one site to a furnace at Coleraine to an offtake in Indiana, we can essentially build that electronically and work our way through those models in real time and answer the questions. If we're going to do this coupling, what are some good bets? Which are the ones that might succeed? Where do you want it? One of the questions that came up a couple of weeks ago, we're going to turn Hibbing into Gary, Indiana? No, that's not the point. What makes sense and what can we do together with that? So a potential scenario, we might just focus on iron and whatever hydrogen we got to do that here in the state. That's a scenario. What do we need to be looked at? Another one might be, well, let's look at iron and critical minerals because there's communication between those two. Let's insert data centers and let's see if they can actually be upheld. All right, that's a scenario. And the last example is we look at everything and just ignore data centers for now and see how they come in together. That's an example of what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. So this is an important slide, and it's ugly, but it makes a point. The research demonstration and de-risking is the MITI effort. MITI is not going to go build a plant. Okay? Our job is to help work between the public and private sector to make the facilitate that kind of investment. That's our constant. What we want to do is to get industries, plural, to come in and work with this region to move to the support, to the partnering, to the investment, to the commissioning. And this is just a picture of what we, a graphical representation of what this might look like for a brand new iron type of a facility. You're talking about 10 to 12-year timeline on a rapid scale. But there are other industries that we could be part of that, or come in before or after, but we're looking to do that modeling of what's the most probable combination of things we should be driving here in the state and in the country. So I just want to leave you with that kind of a picture, because we aren't going to go and have a new plant down the street on Tuesday next week. It's going to take a lot, as I said earlier, it's going to take a lot of work and collaboration and coordination. But this is the picture we're going to leave you with as we move forward into this modeling phase and understanding what is possible. So with that, I am going to turn it over to shift into the engaged conversation with Jamie Alexander.
So we'll briefly turn our attention from the technical that Rolf just described to the other half, or the other part of the equation that makes this transformation not just possible, but durable and shared and resilient. And that's community engagement. Technology alone is not going to create this future. It's going to be all of us. It's people that will do that. I think Paul Wellstone, the legendary Paul Wellstone, said it best when he said, "We all do better when we all do better." And that has really informed our approach to community engagement. So all of our activities are informed by what's happened here in the past, by the historical context of this place. We actively involve stakeholders in planning and implementation. We seek to align the project with community priorities. And when we get feedback, we use that feedback where we can to try to shift the project. We work to provide timely updates to all stakeholders in a transparent manner. And we work to uncover where there could be opportunities for shared benefit. And I would actually love to we have an advisory panel that helps to guide this work. For any members of the community advisory panel in the audience, can you stand up and wave? Because they're a big help for us in helping to understand these things. So over the last 18 months or so, we've been collecting feedback. We've been talking to community members in various venues, collecting feedback on, questions, concerns, ideas, ways that, this project could be of benefit to them or could align with community priorities. And those questions ran, the spectrum of concerns about land, air, water, jobs, workforce, labor rights, tribal and treaty rights. Lots of different kinds of questions, concerns, and ideas for collaboration have come out of that. And that's going to continue. That remains a core part of our approach. And I'm going to now turn it over to Louise Milchich at GPI to talk about our permitting and regulatory approach.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here in lovely Virginia, Minnesota. I woke up quite early with one of my colleagues and we made the trip up here, and it was sort of idyllic and wonderful, and I'm happy to be here. I grew up in Cohasset, Minnesota. I always say when I'm up here that I acknowledge that's not part of the Iron Range, but it does mean that I kind of value that sort of fall morning on, the Highway 169 headed up the range. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about creating the enabling environment for MITI to be successful. I think we've heard a lot about the technological piece of it. And there's a component of it that is very human and that very much involves all the people in this room and people who aren't in this room, but that we hope to occupy rooms that we speak in along the way and that we hope to engage. So I'll read this slide to you. Really, I think one of the things that we need to do is, in order to realize Minnesota's potential as a hub for industrial innovation, we need strong policy and permitting pathways, engaged communities, and a supportive statewide policy framework. And one of the pieces that the Great Plains Institute is bringing to the table in the MITI partnership is to focus on that component of it and to think about creating the enabling environment and what that means in terms of policy and permitting pathways. And when we talk about that, I think it's important to understand that we're talking about an enabling environment, not a free-for-all, but finding the ways that we can move forward with the participation and the thought partnership of all kinds of different folks in this room. So this is really, frankly, part of the engaged piece as well. And I was a little nervous to get up and speak today about the component that we are working on within the MITI sphere, because it's really not fully baked. It's in the works. This is all percolating as we come into rooms together, talk about MITI, and start to learn from each other. None of us has the answer, but I think in this room and in the conversations that will happen around MITI, we will begin to discover the answer, because all of the pieces of it, I think, are here. And to talk just a little bit about our overall approach to the policy and regulatory work, I think the one first really important part to work on as we cultivate the body of work to advance the policy and regulatory conditions to support the MITI vision is to really understand the current state. There's so much history around policy and permitting frameworks in Minnesota. There's so much history around the industry here. And there's a lot that we need to, I think, gather from the communities and from the people who have had the real experience of living the history in this region and across the state where the MITI ecosystem will take hold. The second piece of that is sort of establishing consensus principles for regulatory change. So really hearing from that audience and coming collectively to an agreement about a set of principles that can guide us as we work to develop then a shared policy and regulatory roadmap. And finally, as we work collaboratively to effect those changes that we have put together in that roadmap. So when we think about that policy and regulatory framework, I just can't say enough that it's about all of the voices in this room coming together and helping to inform what we want that to look like, putting the right safeguards in place, and creating the right pathways for certainty for industry as well. And that is my very short piece of it, because I know that we are getting onward in our agenda. So I will turn it back to one of the two. I'll turn it back to anybody. This is my bottom the audience. I did. Go ahead.
Thanks, Louise. That's just another example of the heavy lift we got to put on all of our shoulders together. I'm gonna wrap this piece up with that piece about inspiring. So what are those next steps? And very quickly, what we're looking at are these, this is what MITI is driving right now. We're driving scenario modeling funding. There are a number of funders we're talking to fund those scenario models that I talked about a moment ago. There are many industry partnerships that we're managing right now, looking at different kinds of technology, how they might interlace, all the way to building small pilots here in the state to understand how they can fit in with Minnesota resources, as well as the existing industry infrastructure. Community tribal partnerships, Jamie's been doing a fantastic job of driving that. We're seeking funding and receiving it for continuing that work and actually accelerating it so we can continue to get this kind of conversation. The industrial road mapping, again, collaborating with Minnesota agencies to deliver that roadmap for the future. We are working very hard to leverage state investments. The legislature has been very generous in helping NRI be ready to pull federal funding into the state and developing those partnerships with the US DOE, the Department of Defense, and our industry partners. And of course, our legislators who are here today and those that are on the camera and those that we work with routinely, making sure that we're making them aware of what this is about, how they can help, and where we need guidance, quite frankly. Bottom line, we need everybody, and welcome again. Finally, there's a lot of connections. Some of you are in here today. None of us are doing this by ourselves, and this is an opportunity to make sure we're underscoring that MITI, SAF, SNEAM, Department, all of these that are represented in here are here, and that's the collaboration we're looking for. So the bottom line, as we get into this afternoon and start thinking about how can you fit in, how can your organization fit in, how can you help thinking about what are the things that are missing, the things that are working, the things that are not. That'll be this afternoon's brainstorm, but I'll leave you with a picture. Just imagine for a minute if we succeed with this, even a small part. That's Split Rock Lighthouse at sunrise. We can make that happen. Think about how what we do and how what Minnesota is able to do as the leaders for the nation, how we can direct that, and how we can see what that new sunshine might look like when it comes full bore. So with that, I'm gonna stop, and I think I'm turning to you, and I'm leaving.
Okay, so we're gonna open up to any audience questions on anything from Jason, Louise, Rolf, or I that we just presented, and then we'll go into a networking break until 10:25. So if there's any questions, we'll pass a mic around. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll come to you. Open floor. If there's any NRI colleagues who want to thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentation, very informative. I'm up here from the Twin Cities. Cottage Grove is my area. And I've worked with Cal and learned a lot about mining industry and stuff like that. But one of the things that when I'm hearing and listen to this is kind of sometimes I see maybe an indifference by other members who live in the Twin Cities. In other words, their world is the collar counties. And so what happens, and sometimes you have to say, bad case scenarios, good case scenarios. What's the scenario if nothing's done? If it just, if this just like the rest of Minnesota, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Twin Cities get bigger and bigger and bigger. And how does that affect people that are in the Twin Cities? So in other words, nothing gets done, totally the mining collapses and stuff. How does it affect people down in the Twin Cities? And the other thing is, what's the other scenario? If everything that you do come through, how does that benefit again so many people that are making the decisions down in the Twin Cities to do that. And kind of that's the two things and stuff like that, because it just seems like it's, you know, even in our last session, it seemed like, you know, with what was happening and the shutting down, it just seemed like it didn't really connect with a lot of people. You're hours away, our life is here. What happens up there will just happen and stuff. So that's just, I think, some of the things that I would like to see so I can bring back down to, you know, talk along with Cal and other friends from the range, just like we have to deal with this. It's still Minnesota. Thank you.
Since I got the mic right here, I'll just grab it. Thank you, Wayne, for those comments. One thing that seems mysteriously absent from the conversation when we build out, because it's going to happen, right? When we build out data centers, when we build out with hydrogen, when we build out with clean steel, I've got a green steel rather. Wayne and I will take the tour at Misabi later this afternoon. I look forward to my third tour there. All of these things require critical minerals. And that seems quite absent from the conversation because in this country, we are not producing critical minerals. And we have one miner of nickel in the nation up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Eagle Mine. One. We're importing all of these minerals. We don't have access to them. I think the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense are very, very concerned about this. And these things are great, but they don't exist by themselves. There's a component here that I think needs to be brought into the conversation very strongly.
Well, I'll address that last one first. It is in the conversation. That's what critical materials are all about. And when you talk about our critical minerals, that's one way to pursue them is to ship those minerals out of the state. Another approach that we're driving is how do we make critical materials here in the state that are higher value? Okay, so instead of literally taking our rocks and sending them out of the state, let's make nickel sulfate here in the state. So that's that conversation side. I'm sorry to see that it wasn't evident, but that's a key part of those three industries that we're talking about: iron and steel, the critical materials, and the carbon and fuels. Good. Okay.
I don't see the mining side of the conversation. But I do see the user side and the processing side, that's great. We don't smelter, like when we have 2 smelters in this country, 2, maybe 3.
Correct.
So I'd like to hear more about that in the conversation.
Okay, all right, we'll build that in. But that's what some of the work that we're looking at is how do we process those materials with less energy and less water, perhaps with no water. And those are all really beneficial to the challenges that we're facing here in the state. The industries that are engaged are doing a lot of work as well. And I'm not here to speak for them, but the opportunities that we see there is how do we develop those processes to answer the getting the most benefit out of those materials as a state, at the same time as we build the infrastructure to manage the impacts. That is the focus, and that's what was on that portfolio of technology slide that we showed. Going all the way from the minerals themselves, all the way through managing the impacts, developing and demonstrating the technologies that they can use less energy and less water. And I'll iterate that a lot of the work we've been doing for the iron side of the industry has been looking at how do we reduce grinding costs. Because when you look at the energy used by humanity on this planet, there's a huge fraction of the energy we generate in this planet that's used for grinding minerals. There's a big stake there. So what we're doing is trying to find those places where we can make a difference that helps the industry move forward. Okay. Swinging back to the first set of questions. What you outlined is exactly the reason for having these kinds of conversations around the state. Being able to listen to one another and understand the impact of the minerals industry as well as the agriculture industry and look for those interactions between those is going to be a big part of the continuing conversation. I think it's also, and I have some of our colleagues in here that are engaged in having those conversations around the state. It takes conversation and education of what various industries across the state bring to the state economy. If iron were to not evolve at all, and we steadfastly remain working on taconite alone, it will disappear. The iron coming into the emerging steel industry will come from Brazil and Eastern Canada. That, and then, good.
But then tell me, how does that affect Minnesota taxes, livelihood, all that stuff? It's really,
It's a direct impact on taxes and livelihood because the mine taxes have a direct impact on education across the state. If you have a region of any state, and there's plenty of examples around the country where a region of a given state is extremely economically in extreme economic hardship, it's a burden for the rest of the state. And given the fact that many people in the state of Minnesota like to come to northern Minnesota for their vacations, you know, that's a big part of another investment that's not always monetized. Now, if you look at some of the emerging industries in the state that could very well use, I'll use iron as an example, could use iron. There's a company that just broke ground in Sartell to make high value magnets without rare earths and the iron group. There's a link right there that we can point to right now. The other thing that we can point to is as we develop, take this other step and make other iron products, Form Energy has been asking lots of questions here in the state. How can they access Minnesota iron? And other battery manufacturers, how can they access high value iron? Some of that would happen in the Twin Cities as well. So, you know, when you have the opportunity within a state to have your resources and have industry in the state, across the state, you start seeing interdependence, and that's some of the communication points. And just to leave the.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a hard question you ask about how do we get, you know, people from the Twin Cities to care about what happens on the range, and people from the range to care about what happens in the Twin Cities. And fundamentally, I think we just need to get to know each other, you know, as people, right? So that you look and you see about how they make a living and where they live, and you care about them first and foremost as a person. And then once you can do that, you can think about the things that influence their livelihoods and their lives and their ability to provide for their children, right? So it's really about opening up the range to invite the Twin Cities folks in to come visit us. And then if they can't come visit us, it's about us getting down there and bring our message of how we do things and what we do, and that we're not monstrous industry people up here, you know, that we provide a service that has impacts, you know, and there's trade-offs to that, right? So it's really about creating those opportunities for dialogue. You know, the direct financial impact, we can quantify that for you, and we can share that for you. And also, right, you know, we fund the school trust that goes to every student in the Twin Cities. You know, the city of Minneapolis benefits more on an absolute dollar value than does, you know, Rock Ridge. Like Rock Ridge, I think gets maybe $200,000 to $400,000 a year from that school trust. The Minneapolis gets $2.5 million from that school trust, even though Rock Ridge is right next to that mine, right? And we're not saying that that's unfair. We're just saying that's sort of a fact, right? So we can share those facts and figures. I don't know if that moves the needle as much as like, let's invite people in, let's show people to the area, let's show them how we do things. And I think my commissioner had some comments to offer on the topic. So
I just think that when you say how does it impact not only Minnesota, it's not just Minnesota. The taconite that is, you know, mined here in Minnesota, I think it's not just a state issue if taconite mining goes away. It is a Great Lakes issue, and it is a national issue because Michigan is the only other place that we're mining domestic ore. If Minnesota is not producing ore, this is a national security issue, and I think it's really important to note that if it is not Minnesota or Michigan ore, then it is all imported ore. And at what point do we become, you know, beholden on other countries? So I just want to make that point that it is not just even Minnesota, it is national security.
Good morning. I apologize for being late. Can you pull that screen at the triangle up? That showed that, I'm Representative Roger Scraba from Ely, kind of the heart of a lot of this, what's going on, right there. So the number two, the established consensus principles for regulatory change. I can honestly say we've been trying to do that for 30 years. And every time we get a group together, it's always, we're going to save it. We're going to save it. We're not going to use it. We're going to save it. Who we saving it for? And by the way, technology has changed. It is not 1902. It's 2025. We can dig a hole in the ground, extract it, and come back to that same hole 100 years later and not know what we did. Between us and Mother Nature, we can fix those things. But we can't get that through to the people that do not want mining, period. I've been involved with it my whole life. I've sat with the friends and everybody in Ely at the meeting saying, listen, we'll put $300 million into an account and we'll make sure that any mitigation has to be. No, we don't want the money. We just don't want mining, period. So number two you don't even get off of number two. And then you will re-engage, get new people to re-engage it. It reverts back to the original people that are like, we don't want it, period. There's people in this room that actively oppose mining. They oppose it. They don't want nothing to do with it. And then the weird thing that we've seen, the copper, nickel, the precious metals, the no, now it's creeping into taconite mining. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. You know, my gosh, we've been doing this our whole lives up here. The hole in Ely, the water, the spring water goes into the boundary waters, goes to Hudson Bay. That's from a mine, and it's still going, yet everybody says the wilderness is pristine. Well, it comes from mining. So I'm at odds with, I think what you're doing is right, but it feels like you're just rehashing what we've tried. And the cast of characters has to become more tolerant. And I've been trying, you know, like I don't bring Wayne up here. Thank you for coming, Wayne, by the way. You know, I was wondering, I was like, can you turn it down a shade? I had to do that. That's when you're in the same pocket. When you're in the same pocket, you can do that. But I'm trying to. I get what you want to do, and I think it makes sense, and I think it. Ultimately, here's the thing: copper nickel mining, the state had rules. We followed the rules. We're going through the rules, and everybody that could oppose it got a judge on their side and are opposing it. And we can't get past the permitting. No matter what we do, someone finds another reason to no. So, and the other thing, and I'm sorry I'm being so negative, but the other thing you talk about the ore, how you want to value add the ore in here in Minnesota. When Duluth Metals came to Ely, I was all giddy. I'm like, wow, we're going to have copper piping made in Minnesota. We're going to have copper wire made in Minnesota. And then you learn that it's a worldwide commodity and that it's already sold before it came out of the ground. So it's not staying in Minnesota. It's going wherever that company sells it to. So if you want to buy it, that it's made here, we either legislate it in a percentage or we set a price and say, this is what we can pay you for that. And if they want to work with us, that can be a step. But those have to be upfront because their job is to extract that mineral and make money with it. That's real simple. And Ida, you're correct. It is further down the line. It's not just us here, but we have to, and this is what's bugging me right now is we have to defend taconite mining. We have to defend it. Where it was always just a natural, we're going to do it. Now it's like, no, it's under attack. At least it feels like it. But before we start moving forward, I mean, it's nice having everything on paper, but where have we done these before? Have we done it? A lot of this we have. And a lot of it, we just got to figure out how to get off of center. We have to, get the leaders of the environmental groups and get the leaders of us together in the room and say, it's gonna happen. No, it's not. Okay? I could tell you how many of those meetings I've been to where we leave years, we do this. But something has to give. Something has to give. I think what NRRI is doing is phenomenal. I've been a supporter of it, before I got elected, but even now. They have the ability to use the science to prove if we want to go forward, like understand the current state, establish consensus principles for regulatory change, develop shared policy and regulatory. The science can answer every one of those questions if we trust the science. And I'm trusting NRRI. That's where I am. But no real questions, just a lot of observations. I hope we can come to a consensus in the future. Because our world, I'll throw another one just to throw a bomb in it again. We have this 86,000 acres in the Boundary Waters Kenora Wilderness, that's school trust land. And I've been trying to trade the land. The law on 64 says you must trade the land. And I've got elected people in our state saying, oh no, we don't want to do that. We'll sell it. Let's sell it to the federal government. No, we get that school trust land out of the Boundary Waters, put it outside, and then mine it and log it. That money goes in. And I've been told, oh, you don't understand, the 34 million you're going to get will be worth more than by the time it gets done. No, it won't. School trust land is a gift that keeps on giving. We didn't sell it like the metro area. We need to use it. And this is where this mining, I got years of discussion on this to go, but we need to work to get that out so we can generate income. But thank you.
Yeah, Roger, thanks for sharing. This is exactly why this is important. To put these perspectives on the table. One of the things, I'm not gonna get into a long answer because we'll be here for the rest of the day and we're gonna get people getting a little antsy and the coffee is ready, but one thing we're trying to do here is that we're demonstrating. And I think the power of demonstration and having people witness and experience things can change conversations as well. So appreciate that support, appreciate these comments. If this was easy, it would have been done, but it's gonna require conversations and listening like people did. So I think we're gonna have. We're gonna have a 10-minute break because people are getting a little antsy. I am, but let's continue the conversation and let's not shy away from these conversations and bring these things forward. Get some coffee, relax, stretch, network.
We have Julie Pierce from Minnesota Power. We have Joe Broking from Wasabi Metallics, and from Native Sun, we have Bob Blake. The format for today is I'm going to ask them to each introduce themselves briefly, 1 to 2 minutes about themselves and their organization. And then we'll be asking a series of questions, asking our panelists, again, in the interest of time, that maybe only 1 or 2 respond to each question. And whenever you're so moved, grab the microphone and speak. And then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for questions. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to limit that to 1 to 2 questions from the audience. So make them good. All right, so Peter, if you wouldn't mind, brief introduction for yourself.
Good morning.
Flip around. There you go.
Good morning. Peter Froschen, CEO of Greater MSP, which is a public-private partnership based in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, focused on growing the economy and creating more opportunity for everybody in that region. Greater MSP, for those of you who don't know, is cross-sector. So it's the University of Minnesota, it's St. Thomas, it's really big companies, it's startups, it's counties and cities, and we work with the state as well. Doing kind of the big things together that no entity can do alone, recognizing that the economy is always changing. For us to have a prosperous region and state, we need to be modernizing and reinventing our economy, so there's opportunity for the next generation. And that's kind of what brings us here. Greater MSP has 3 kind of main functions. One is to do an independent analysis of how is the economy performing. So pre-political, what's important and how are we doing, and then benchmarking that. against other regions and states around the country. Second is to create the strategy for building the economy. So that's one of the jobs of Greater Mississippi in the metro area. And then third, and kind of most importantly, is actually implementing that strategy at scale. So doing it. So data is important, strategy is important, but actually producing results is most important. And so to do that, we have over 1,000 different leaders and over 400 different organizations that assemble in teams to get things done and deliver results. So it's very active, it's very innovative, and I think one of the reasons we are participating today is we built and run something called the Minnesota SAF Hub, which is in the process of building an entirely new industry and market anchored in Minnesota to decarbonize air travel by making jet fuel out of a lot of different things that are not fossil fuels.
Excellent. Good morning. Julie Pierce, Vice President of Strategy and Planning for Minnesota Power. I've been in the energy industry about 28 years, and I grew up here with most of my family living right here in the Iron Range, and I just have a really strong connection to this great region. I've been with Minnesota Power about 18 years. My responsibility for Minnesota Power is long-range strategy, strategic initiatives, technology origination, and markets. And as you know, Minnesota Power has been an energy partner and energy solutions provider for many of you in this room and for the broader Northeast Minnesota area for over 120 years. We pride ourselves on positioning, growing, and being with this region as it is transformed over the many decades. And as we'll hear a little bit more about today, we've transitioned and positioned for this moment in which we need to be ready for large industrialization and a sustainable energy future. So look forward to talking with you more.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Broking. I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of Mesabi Metallics. Interestingly enough, I was born and raised on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. I have spent 30 years in industry working in Minnesota, but also working all over the world. So I've had the opportunity to see many things in many different jurisdictions. And most recently, in June of last year, when I was appointed the CEO of Mesabi, I'm able to bring all of these things back to Minnesota and to a place that I'm very passionate about to develop the first new taconite operation on the Iron Range in more than 50 years. But more importantly, build a business that is sustainable in every way. And when we talk about that, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about certainly from an environmental perspective, producing a premium quality DR grade pellet that will help transform steel production, not only in the US, but globally, but also sustainable from a cost perspective so that we can make sure that the dollars that are in your pocketbook go as far as they possibly can. And I look forward to speaking today.
Hey everyone, bonjour. My name Robert Blake. I am the Executive Director of Native Sun Community Power Development. I'm also the owner of Solar Bear and tribal citizen of the Red Lake Nation. I am here today because I believe renewable energy needs to be a part of this industry and everything and all of the other industries that are going to come along with it. So we have a choice. Do we either want to burn coal or do we want to use renewable energy? And I said we use renewable energy, and which I look forward to having this discussion.
All right, well, thank you, especially for staying brief with your introduction so we can save time for the questions. And the first question is really looking at the big picture, because many of your organizations are already participating in the transformation. Love to hear some examples. If any of you could share a project that you're working on, a partnership or an innovation, and then really what's motivating that for your organization. So if you're so inspired, Julie, maybe.
Great, I'll jump in. So as you know, Minnesota Power, longtime energy producer, we've been working for the past 12, 15 years to ensure that we've been transforming our energy supply to be more renewable, more sustainable, and affordable, and most importantly, reliable. We have been working that through partnerships with industry, partnerships with communities, and carefully transitioning our system. And I'm happy to say that this light that's coming right here today is being served with over 50% renewable energy. And just 20 years ago, it was 95% coal energy. And that transformation has been a significant innovative opportunity for this positioning this part of the state, setting an example of leadership in energy transformation across the nation, and working with our customers on a regular basis. But at the core of it is the reliability. And this is why I just enjoy these science-based programs, because in millisecond delivery of energy and the reliability that we need to keep everything moving in our lives and our industry, it's a millisecond difference between the lights on and the lights off. And so reliability and the physics have to matter. So this innovation that's coming is so exciting because it is paying attention to the need for reliability and affordability and sustainability together. And I think that's what I'm just have been so pleased and privileged to be part of. And the energy partnerships that we're seeing emerge have been tremendous. And I think that's how we advance forward here in this region.
Thank you. Anyone else? Joe?
Well, I definitely want to speak on this subject for sure. So listen, I think I touched on this in my opening, and we obviously have a really good partnership that we're working on with Minnesota Power, and many partnerships with many different people and different stakeholders within the room. But I think it's important to talk about what really makes Mesabi Metallics different and how we are innovating and really working to change an industry. So this is a question that I think is a little bit more targeted at what I would call more of a micro element of innovation and transformation. But from my perspective, at Mesabi Metallics, we're doing something that's extremely innovative, where we're building an entire business to transform an industry. What really does that mean? Well, it starts with a raw material. And this is what makes Minnesota very, very important to not just Minnesota, not just the US, but globally. A raw material from a geologic perspective, and I saw my close friend Larry Letton in here, he used to say we're geologically blessed. The fact is, at Mesabi Metallics, we are geologically blessed because the ore allows us to make what we call a premium quality DR grade pellet. And then that pellet can be used to make direct reduced iron. Well, how is that different in the steel process? It's meaningfully different. Traditionally, we make steel by taking blast furnace grade pellets and combining that with coking coal to make pig iron. That pig iron is then transformed into steel. What we're talking about here is upgrading that iron ore to the point where you make a premium quality, a super high quality DR grade pellet, and then that pellet is transformed into iron using natural gas as a reductant versus coking coal within a DRI plant. Very, very important because it meaningfully reduces the amount of carbon emissions per ton of steel produced. In fact, we believe by using our process, by using our product, we can actually reduce the carbon emissions per ton of steel by more than 60% by using natural gas. It's also, our business is a stepping stone into making steel truly carbon free. So I know there's probably going to be a conversation here about hydrogen at some point. From our perspective, when hydrogen becomes viable, we will be ready to adapt our process to actually make hydrogen-based DRI, and our customers will make hydrogen-based DRI, which again will allow us to produce steel truly carbon-free. Our carbon emissions per ton of steel by utilizing that process will be zero. Importantly, when we think about innovation, we have to do it in a responsible way so that at the end of the day, we're consciously thinking about our customers and the impact that innovation has on their pocketbook. So what I really love about Mesabi Metallics, and it's why I'm here, is that we can check both the boxes. We can truly be environmentally sustainable and transform an industry. And if we do this right, we can be the most cost competitive producer of steel on the planet. We can be the most cost competitive producer of steel on the planet. Never before in my career have I been able to say those two things in the same sentence. And it's pretty exciting. So that's what we're doing at Mesabi.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Yeah.
Hey, Tim, I just want to say too, in these partnerships, the Red Lake Nation, was able to partner with Minnesota Power on the Great Northern Transmission Line, bringing this 50% renewable energy that we're sitting under right now using, right? And, when Minnesota Power first built this project, I was asked by the folks at Red Lake, hey, Bob, Minnesota Power wants to build this transmission line through here. What do you think about this? And I was like, let's do it. And let's make sure that we can interconnect our renewable energy to that transmission line. And now remember, y'all, this was like, I want to say, 10 years ago? Not knowing that what was going to be happening with Mesabi, what was going to be happening with all these different issues was going to be taking place. But I think now that we see all this transforming and all this happening, the opportunities that are going to be there for partnership with Red Lake and with Minnesota Power and Mesabi, and then also to add, I mean, when Minnesota Power did not have to reroute that line, we saved them ratepayers, Minnesota Power, millions and millions of dollars. So, I mean, I think it's that way that we're working together to really try to find the best way to provide renewable energy and more environmental sustainable way for all these different industries. I think that's what's really exciting about this project.
Thanks, Bob. Awesome examples of what good is happening today. So we're going to transition a little bit more about the barriers and the bottlenecks. And Peter, I was wondering if maybe you could help address the question of what are some of the biggest barriers maybe holding back transformation. I think you've got a good story to tell about sustainable aviation fuel there. And are there any policy shifts or public investments or things that you think that could make a difference in your world?
Sure. I'm just peeking around the corner to my friends at that table over there. So I actually think the biggest barrier is how we're thinking about everything. So there was some conversation prior to the panel about, the metro and the rest of Greater Minnesota. And I think if we kind of think in a new way about how the state needs to work so that everybody can have more opportunity, it's going to unlock a lot of new things. So Greater MSP is actively working in Duluth and in northern Minnesota with Apex and with NRI, and in Rochester with Destination Medical Center and Mayo Clinic, increasingly in Mankato with Region 9 and Greater Mankato Growth, because the biggest opportunities this state has to create opportunity for people and generate enough tax revenue to kind of pay for our future are in industries that are connected. So here, this industrial decarbonization conversation is one of those industries. This has to happen. We have to do this. We will only be able to do this actually if we're doing it together. It will go much faster. And we actually can learn from a lot of other things that are happening across the state. I think what the state has done and is doing in Rochester with the Destination Medical Center is an interesting model to learn from. If we think about like what you just saw on the screen, this could be like the Mayo Clinic of clean industry. That this is a design that is globally significant. It's very complex. Not every place is going to be able to pull it off. We could build that here, and the state has a role to play, but industry has a really important role to play. So one of the other things that was mentioned is sustainable aviation fuel. This is a global challenge that no place in the world has figured out. Every major airline, Delta, airlines in Europe, know they have to get off of fossil fuel-based jet fuel. There are no electric planes for the next 40 or 50 years. They're kind of like, don't get on one of those. It's not going to be ready. And, we're working with Airbus. We're working with Boeing. These are very expensive pieces of equipment. Once they're sold, they're flown for 30 years, right? So every day one of these planes is bought, kind of we're doubling down on that economy. So 3 years ago, Delta came to Greater MSP, because Delta is part of the partnership, and said, we have a very big problem. We are committed to being a net zero airline. The only way to do that is by getting our fleet onto SAF. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's called sustainable aviation fuel. And it's making jet fuel out of stuff that's not fossil fuels. And that seemed like an impossible thing that they were talking about. That was 3 years ago. We did a lot of things. I'll cut out the middle bit. But We moved very quickly. We built a really integrated partnership that is highly innovative. And we created something called the Minnesota SAF Hub, which is now being recognized around the world as one of North America's, if not the world's, most advanced ways to actually solve this problem. That has a lot of moving parts, but something that it involves is there was a wood waste to SAF tour in northern Minnesota that many people in this room helped us create, because we're working actively in northern Minnesota to create jet fuel out of wood waste that could be 75% carbon reduction or better, to be used at MSP Airport and shipped out of the Port of Duluth to the world. So that's something we are doing right now. We're hoping there's good news and there are announcements coming in months, not years. But I think the bottom line is it's super complicated. It's very intense. It has to be driven. It's not going to just happen. We do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so this is a vision that we're looking at today that we've been working on together a little bit for a few years. We really need to bring it to life and we need to drive it. Otherwise, it won't just happen.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in and thank you again for the kind words on the innovation. There's so many ways that we're innovating in energy. And I guess one of my thoughts to barriers is that we have to find our way to yes as a state and as a community and as a region and as just individual communities together. Through the past 15 years, as I've been working on the transition for Minnesota Power through its Energy Forward strategy, we've hit a lot of walls, a lot of no's. But what we do is we do the stakeholder engagement, we do the consensus building, we try to share the information. And so I think what the barrier is that we have to get into that right mindset. I heard it earlier. We also have to recognize that Minnesota as a state is struggling just as much as we might feel like we're struggling here. And the economic imperative for our state and for this part of the state to do well is broad, and it's broad impacting. So the state is struggling. We all need to get into the same boat and start rowing in the same direction, but do it in a thoughtful way. And one way that I just want to call out, and I don't know if it's innovation or if it's just strong collaboration, is the recent groundbreaking legislation that was passed around the data center community in the last session. And I know many of our legislators are here. And this is a wonderful example of bipartisan work to ensure that we can do an industry right in the state of Minnesota. And it was legislation that was created customer protections like no other in the United States to ensure that if a new industry like the data centers come to the state, which as Rolf said, can be a help, and it can be a very good help to the industrial growth that all of us want to do in your own industries, can be done here without impacting other communities. And some of those customer protections are what will enable us to and be position this state for that type of growth. We have the infrastructure, we have the resources, we have to get to yes in a way that helps protect what's most important to us, but we have to do that together. So my get to yes, continue to innovate, and then just recognize what we have here in the state.
Perfect, thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I definitely feel like this is something that I want to be pretty direct on. And for those that know me, know that I can be quite direct and honest, always transparent, always honest. Our biggest problem, it's nothing that's listed on the sheet. You wanna know what our biggest barrier is? It's you. It's all of you. At Mesabi Metallics, I doubt that anybody in this room thought that we would advance that project. It was a dead project. SR needed to be barred from doing business in the state of Minnesota. The communities didn't want us. Stakeholders were saying no. And through a grassroots effort of consensus building, we went out and told a truthful story about what we're doing, what's changed, and what's different. And remarkably, whether we were talking to the trades, We were talking to the tribes. We were talking to local communities. We were talking directly to the governor's office, talking directly to the president of the United States. It didn't really matter. It was something that people genuinely wanted. And we had to find a way to build consensus amongst each and every group. But at the end of the day, it was calling out people and saying, do you want this? Because we're here and we're willing to do it. And, you know, I'm sure Frank is trembling a little bit about what I might say right now about permitting, but it's interesting. I mean, I can tell you that having worked with the agencies for a long time at a few different companies, it's not the agencies. You know, Frank's team works really hard to see responsible industrial development happen, and the DNR works really, really hard to see in responsible industrial development. And they're not the problem. It's actually you. You are the people that can help determine law, and your voices can be heard. And it's easy to say, you know, we need to get to yes. We do need to get to yes, but you all need to take a look in the mirror. And you need to figure out what you want. And you need to come together to do that. It's what we've done on a micro level at Mesabi. And that can be done from a bigger picture perspective. Because we do have more commonality than we do have differences, interestingly enough. I see many people out there on their iPhones right now, and this analogy gets used all the time. We don't necessarily want to mine for copper, but we all want our iPhone. We all want to be able to communicate with our kids. We need to be realistic about what we're talking about here, and you all need to take a look in the mirror because you're the barrier.
All right, well, thank you, Joe. And Bob, I want to maybe provoke, because this is a really good dialogue we've got going here. What you're doing, one of my favorite questions is always, how is this not more of a thing? And I'd love to hear maybe your thoughts on how do our tribal communities participate more in this transformation?
Well, first of all, I'll just put out the opportunity to have a piece, all 11 tribes could have a piece of the 150 megawatt solar power plant that would sit adjacent to the mining operation, right? That right there will be behind the meter, so all of that power will go directly to the operations itself. And so, I mean, that's part right there is really exciting because we're talking about, not only would the mine save, probably millions of dollars, right, in energy costs and bringing it in, but they're also going to be paying that out into those individual communities. And, I also think through as we move forward, I think as this operation grows and the needs of the community in Duluth and the other industries that are going to need power, I think this is also going to be an opportunity for tribes to participate by delivering through a power purchase agreement and those kinds of needs into the community. So that's what's really exciting about this. And the tribes being a part of that is really just a really wonderful opportunity.
Awesome. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to combine a few questions for one last question for our panelists before the audience. And it's a two-part. One is, what makes Minnesota unique, especially northern Minnesota, to be a strong place to lead? And then if you could ask one thing of this network, the people in this room, and Joe, we heard your answer on this one, but maybe you can add to it. What would you ask from for help to make your organizations more successful? Peter, maybe you want to get us started.
Sure. Well, what makes the opportunity unique is the combination of factors. I mean, one, there's a global port here. There is a workforce. There's a transportation network. There's electricity. There is a century, tradition of building things and creating value out of natural resources. So that's something to build on. It doesn't mean anything will happen. But it means that this is a really good place to make something new happen. And then I think, in the second question, what to ask for, one, I guess maybe, what if we kind of picked up the pace of the dialogue? So, I mean, I'm here from the metro. I kind of that's very much my day job. And I'm here on purpose because I think quite quickly together we can kind of transform the way we're thinking and working across the state. And we can help realize the opportunity that we're talking about today. But what I would need, and I'm representing thousands of other people, is a sense of kind of what the invitation is and what the permissions are. Because we'll be in Germany and Switzerland in like 10 days, working as a part of a team Minnesota to invite investment technology into the state. And I want to be on this team. But to do that effectively and in the right way, I need to understand how I can best be a team player.
Thank you.
I'll just add on all of what Peter said, and then I'll say we have some of the best electrical infrastructure and electrical readiness for a sustainable transformation. So we're already at 50 to 60% renewable energy for any consumer that connects today, and we're positioned to be 90% for the next person that connects. And so I think that that's a really exciting place to be, but it does take us wanting to have strong industry and promoting strong businesses. We can't be dragging each other down. We have to support each other, and we have to recognize that the more industry that comes to Northeast Minnesota, the lower the burden, the lower the tax burden, the lower the electrical rate burden, your schools, your communities, all of what we heard Ralph and others talk about this morning. We need to support industry, and we need to support each other and strong businesses, whether they're new or whether we've been here for 120 years. We need support. And so I think that's a real important part of how we can continue the leadership that we've had in Minnesota.
Thank you.
And I would just say too, everyone here in Minnesota, let's lead in the nation, man. I mean, we're talking about, us setting a model for the rest of the country to follow. And that's what's really, really exciting about this. And, when I think about the opportunities that we have here, to be able to make this happen, to be able to transition an industry that we know that it's, steel and everything else is critical minerals is used in everything, in what we do around the world. I'm sorry, but Bob Lake's not gonna fight climate change and stop it with his $1,000 solar projects. I'm just saying we need to get serious industries like these guys that they're in to be able to move the needle. And this is our opportunity. So I say, Minnesota, let's not waste it.
Awesome. Yeah, Joe, sorry, I feel like I need to comment on this as well. Listen, I think that the other panelists have done a really good job of summarizing the opportunity, and I would just reiterate a couple of things. Every one of you in this room already knows this. We are raw material resource rich. We have the opportunity to do it the right way. Like I said, I need to touch on my global experience visiting mines around the world in developing countries and all sorts of jurisdictions, and seeing industry done in really good ways and seeing industry done in really, really poor ways. The benefit that we get here is we will very responsibly develop these resources for the benefit of this country and all of its citizens and stakeholders. Bob said it, in Minnesota, we need to decide what we want to be. The opportunity is there. It's been there. And we can do these things in a very, very responsible way. And what is it going to take? What do we need? I said this to the community of Nashwauk. I said this to the community of Grand Rapids. We need you to look in the mirror and stand up and decide what you want. It's not going to be one individual. It's not going to be one organization. It requires leadership and education and people really understanding what they're signing up for when they commit to industrial development. And we need you all to be champions of that. Whether you're looking at it more from an environmental perspective, or you're looking at it just from the perspective that you want your grandson or granddaughter to have a job. There's consensus there. And we can come together and do this in a very, very responsible way. And we can achieve unbelievable things right here in Minnesota because of the gift of raw materials. We also have a history of doing this for more than 100 years.
And I can tell you that the talent, the people, the industrial knowledge, I call them industrial athletes, by the way, but our industrial athletes here in northern Minnesota are some of the very best in the world. They will deliver great things. We've been doing it here for a very, very long time, and they will continue to do that if we give them the opportunity. The opposite will happen if we do nothing. We will lose our industrial athletes. We will lose that competency, and we will lose this culture that is very, very difficult to develop.
Thank you, Joe. Well, I am super inspired. I've learned a ton today. Surely our audience has one amazing question. Culminating everything, the collective consciousness of this room, because that's what we have time for right now. So if there's any brave soul out there that feels that we missed something, please speak up. No pressure. Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll just be brief. I appreciate everything everybody said here. We all have to stand together. Peel away the onion, from my perspective, from my family's perspective, from a community perspective here in Virginia, permitting reform has to be done before any of this other stuff can be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and the brevity of that maybe allows for one other. If not, I am sure Jeannie would be very pleased to get us back on schedule. Yes, sir. One last.
Hey, my name is Galen. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the boom bust cycles that people like lose their homes and stuff. So I think my question is related. How do we build wealth in this community with all this like global capital that comes here? Just what you're thinking about that.
Great question. Yeah. Would anyone like to ask that?
Excellent question. And it's another thing we all should be thinking about, Galen. Thank you so much. We have to diversify. We have to diversify the way all industries and all communities, and especially large communities and growing communities do. You diversify everything from the energy sources and where you're getting your energy to the industries that you allow to come into your community and grow and thrive. Diversification helps cycles. And then the second one, because we just obviously went through a very important positioning business opportunity, is to position industry for strength. And so by making sure you have the right partners and making sure you have the financial health of the businesses in your community, I would say that's even as important.
Let's let Peter and then Bob.
Really, I think that's a great point. And I think if we think strategically, like that has to be an objective. Because that would be better. How do you build something that is more resilient and has more continuity to give people more predictability, and more wealth? And I think the pictures that we saw today, this is a different approach, right? It's a lot of different types of products coming out of the same system that are all going to have different markets at different times. So green methanol, green steel, green iron, green hydrogen, there are all kinds of things that can be done with these things. That approach creates a lot of inherent resilience. It's a very different approach than what we've seen in northern Minnesota in the past. And would not only generate more wealth for more people, but really smooth out those cycles.
Thanks. And Bob, a quick thought if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say real quick, when Rolf and Jeannie showed me the slide with all the different industries that were going to be a part of this, I'll tell you right now, Galen, I was skeptical. But when I saw that, I thought, oh, there was a lot of time put into this in making all that happen, because if one industry fails, the other ones can prop each other up in the community, right? That's the opportunity that we're looking at. And so that's when I was bought and sold.
Awesome.
So, sorry.
Yeah, Joe.
As the commodity guy up here on this panel, I feel like that question was in some ways directed, perhaps even directly at me. I think the reality is that we need to develop these businesses in a very sound way. And we, especially talking about mining and commodities, you have to know that there's a finite life to what we're doing. What we're building has a finite life. For example, at Mesabi Metallics, we are doing something truly, truly different. working to decarbonize the steel industry, but nothing lasts forever. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think what we need to do is build these businesses that are transformational, these commodity business. If you do it in the right way, do it in a responsible way, you will smooth out the cycles that will happen within the commodities themselves, but you will also build wealth and diversify the economy at the same time. For example, if we build a steel mill in northern Minnesota, you're going to see steel processing that has never existed here before. There will be hundreds of businesses that will be developed right here on the Iron Range, co-locating next to a steel plant, and that inherently by itself will transform this region. So I think there's always going to be in the commodity space the reality that it's finite. But as we transform and do it responsibly, we will diversify at the same time.
Well, I'm so grateful for the amazing chemistry of the panelists here today. You never know going into these things how it's going to work out. So let's give a big hand to our panelists. Thank you so much. And we're going to continue the conversation with a community conversation with Jamie.
Great, thank
Take
you.
it away.
So, yes, our next panel is gonna join on the stage, please. Where did I sit last?
You get my email about time? I did. All right, good. It's about time. Yeah, that's awesome.
So would you prefer yourself?
What's that? I don't want to start. You don't want to introduce each other? Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for sticking with us. We're gonna break for lunch after this panel. This is an important discussion. We touched on the need for consensus building earlier and about how sometimes these topics can feel like, we have different perspectives, different values and priorities. And this group was convened in order to kind of build consensus or understand kind of where we're each coming from in our, what we value and prioritize and how we might be able to build a bigger tent together. So I'd love to pass it. I'll start with Tamara, actually, maybe give an introduction and a prompt in your intro that if this next industrial chapter succeeds, what does success look like for you? I feel like you gave me the mic that wasn't working on purpose. Good morning.
There you go.
See, as you can tell, we all know each other very well. I'm Tamara Lowney. I am the owner of a consulting business, Perseverance First, and now working with American Peak Technologies as the Vice President of Business Development. And I'm so excited to be here today as a part of this panel. I feel like there's so many opportunities to work with these colleagues, and there really isn't enough to say about the work that's being done by NRI, the partners at NREL, and all the folks here in the room. There's so much happening, there's so much yet to be done. But success to me really looks like collaboration that has come together, and consensus feels like a really big word to me because I feel like consensus means that somehow we all agree, and I think that that really is a bit of a stretch. I heard it earlier from our colleagues today that, we've been trying at this for decades and consensus just has not been achieved. And I think that's really the root of this. We have very different lives from our friends and neighbors in the metro area. We have very different lives from our neighbors in our own communities here. And in my previous decade of work here in northeastern Minnesota, working in economic and business consulting, we know that people have very different levels of what lives look like. What does our family connections look like? What does it mean to have a really
productive and happy life. It looks different for them than it does for you and I. And so for me, success of this work looks like families that have family sustaining wages and jobs so they can live here in rural Minnesota and continue to do the things that they love to do. They don't have to leave their communities. Working today at American P Technologies has been incredible because I can continue to stay in Hill City, Minnesota. I can stay close to my parents. I can help them as they age in place. And so many of us that live in our rural communities want just that. We want to have opportunities for our children that are here in rural Minnesota and not in those metro communities. So success looks like we've been able to attract investment and we've been able to at least take a few of these incredible opportunities and bring them home to Minnesota. Success looks like we've taken some of those policy priorities that we have in northern Minnesota and we've been able to instigate some change. I've worked closely with Minnesota Power in the last several years in my position and with several partners, and I feel like we do have the opportunity to be heard, but in order to do that, we have to show up. And I totally echo what Joe was saying. We can't sit here in northern Minnesota and expect our voices to be heard at the Capitol. So success looks like a movement of northern Minnesotans taking our voice to the Capitol and being heard, taking our voices to our communities and letting those communities speak and then bringing them with us. So we have the voices of northern Minnesota and bringing those voices south to where we need to be heard. That's what success looks like to me. This one.
I do. I want to thank Jamie for inviting me to be on the advisory of the MITI project, and it's been a great opportunity to connect with more people from the range. My background, I straddle both, kind of a combination of both the city and the rural northeastern Minnesota. It's kind of like having your feet on two ice floes that are moving and splitting. I was raised down there. I'm one of 10 kids. House that had one bathroom when we were younger. My dad was fought in the war, World War II, came back, started his own business. I come from an entrepreneurial background. Through that all, we were given pretty much total freedom. We were expected a certain grade point average in school. You could do anything you wanted, but you had to pay for it. So that was kind of the background of where I evolved. At 15, I took a motorboat down the Mississippi River to New Orleans and back up again, and then I started climbing. And this got me into all the expeditions where people know me as expeditions, but I've done a lot of other things in the background. I was educated at St. Thomas, a teacher and a scientist. And my goal in my life was to live in the wilderness. So in 1964, when I was 19, I borrowed a car, drove up to Ely, looked in the North Shore first, and then at Ely, and ended up buying a small piece of property 3 miles, 2 lakes from the nearest road, which is, didn't want to live on a road. So that was where I ended up. And after, when I was 25, I had my rigor education behind me, and that's why I stayed in the city, was to be a certified teacher. I moved to Ely, the city of Ely. It was a really great time for me at that era. In particularly, the community of Ely was very close to me. I was probably one of the only outsiders at that time. I came in town usually on a Friday, walked in for groceries, but became lots of friends from Ely, a lot of the old timers and families and the range, and it was a wonderful part of my life. Being close and being a part of a range community, although I'm an outsider. I love the directness of the people of the range. You always know where you're standing. You don't need to be politically correct. You're accepted as long as you're honest. And so I grew up in that era. And then I went on to do many expeditions and so forth. But the difference in the city is there is this big conflict between city and the range. And I see it, having lived in the city, the advantage of a city is, in Minneapolis in particular, if you lose a job, you can get another job. If you have a family, you have a lot of opportunities. You can choose this school, that school, or this school. But when you're on the range and you're relying on the industry up here for your living. If there's a quirk in the economy or if there's a layoff, which happens, you don't find another job. And the real problem is, as an individual, you can work hard, but how about your family? Your family has to move, they can't get a job, they have to move to get a job, get an education. And a lot of times it's goodbye to your family. You see them on Christmas and Easter and so forth, but you don't have that opportunity like you do in the city to live with your family. And so I've always had a commitment up here for the range. And the reason why I see this as an opportunity and what this means to me is the new transformational industry is actually a dream come true. Its ability to first unite environment and jobs, good jobs in the environment. The energy that we create is our own energy. We're not buying, spending billions of dollars on coal money from Wyoming and so forth. Our energy is local, and that creates jobs in itself. The bottom line of that is the family. The family and economy is like hand in hand in the range. You've got good economy, your family is really tight. So it's in a way it's a moral commitment, but it's also a commitment of creating an industry. And I don't think city people understand the industry up here. A healthy industry up here is healthy for the whole state. The industry creates tax dollars for education here, but education elsewhere. So the opportunity there, the transformation is actually we don't have a choice. We have to transform. We have to. And what is the challenge that I'm interested in is it's obvious here in our discussions here. We have such a diverse opinions in the state and up here, which is very healthy. You can go on both sides or it's kind of in the center or whatever. But the opportunity here of bringing communities into getting some real conversations, not just a 2-hour, 3-hour thing. This is an opener, but we really need to get members of the community, the leaders of the community together in one room or maybe one place for maybe several days, maybe a week at a time to make some real decisions, to build relationships that we have respect and you feel free. And when you're vulnerable and you feel free and respected, you can stay back and forth, you can support, you can confront. And this is personally was what attracts me. This opportunity is we're cutting edge, we're on the frontier, we're explorers, we're discovering something. I don't know why anyone would doubt green steel in here, but it was hard one to sell at the beginning. And that's a good sign at the beginning when you're on the line to something really good. You're always going to get the no's and the naysayers. But as a community, especially a united community, we will be able to make these changes. And that is not if, it's when and the technology is moving in that direction.
I think we're gonna use this one. Okay, this ready to go? Let's try it. We don't want the battery to run out.
Bonjour, hello, everybody. My name is Rob Aiken. My Indian name is Yellow Cloud. I'm a member of the Leech Lake Reservation, and I'm here representing Leech Lake Financial Services. Leech Lake Financial Services is a nonprofit CDI in the city of Cass Lake. Now, as a CDFI, our mission is to provide affordable capital for growth and development for economic development around the Cass Lake and the Leech Lake Reservation area. Now, our service area is 25 miles beyond the Leech Lake Reservation border. And I'm telling you that because we do market studies that includes our service area, which means Bemidji, Grand Rapids, all the way up north of Black Duck, and it also includes the city of Walker for our service area. And over the years, what we've found is we do market studies every couple of years, and it's quite amazing what has come and evolved. I've been with Leech Lake Financial Services now for 13 years, exactly today. Today is my 13th anniversary of doing this work. Well, thank you. We're looking at it more like it's year 14 now, right? Starting this morning, right? But what success looks like. That's what they want us to talk about here in the beginning. And it's hard to articulate what success looks like because the numbers that we're dealing with in our service market, especially for the native population, are they're so diametrically opposed to what the rest of the market's doing when we talk about living wages, right? In our service market, $44 an hour is a livable wage. The native population right now earns 1974. So the median living wage is $44 an hour. The Native American living wage right now is $19.74. Now, that comes with good news because these market studies tell us all kinds of cool stuff, right? And one of the cool things that we see in there is that we've got a population that is 18 to 30 right now that's growing at faster than any other population in the state. Okay. Now, my director of community development came in and we were talking about the economy on the Leech Lake Reservation. He goes, there isn't one. There is no economy here. It's tribal government, right? Tribal government is by far and away the largest employer for our service area. So it's a real challenge as a native CDFI or any kind of provider of capital for entrepreneurs when there isn't any kind of manufacturing, any kind of tech in our service area. So that's why I'm so proud to be part of this advisory board, because over the years that I've been at Leech Lake Financial, we have learned that the economy that we can best build is through housing. And through housing, we started getting into workforce development, right? One of the things CDFIs do is we help people build their credit, right? And the number one reason people come to see us to build credit is because they want to buy a house. So we got really good at getting home buyers. But over the years, we discovered there's nothing to buy. So we started building houses. In doing so, in building houses, we got into workforce development because we have a tribal college with a residential construction program. So we have literally folks that can work on their own house and live in it and own it themselves. So that's really a cool thing. Right now, we're building 20 houses on the Leech Lake Reservation. We've completed 5 here in the last year, and we're selling houses. But what's that got to do with what we're talking about here today? It's because we just tapped into workforce development on the reservation. We learned that nothing is happening with workforce development, especially for future needs for workforce development. So I look at my role on this advisory panel is to be somebody that's on the ground in a community that's suffered from generational and systematic poverty. And success to us looks like, and I think this is kind of neat, a green ironclad pathway to the opportunities for employment in the industries. Green ironclad. What do you think about that?
Great.
Yeah, that's
Nice job.
I am a reservation Indian, but I grew up with 2 bathrooms. So the one bathroom, he's really busy over there. So I'm excited to be working with Will to relate to what it's like with some of the red light. So with that, I'd like to pass along the mic over to Paul.
How do you follow that? Wow. Thank you, everyone. My name is Paul Peltier. I'm the executive director of RAMS, and RAMS is the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools. So it's all the cities, townships, and school districts on the Iron Range in the Taconite Assistance area. It's a really unique animal. There's nothing like it in the state, there's nothing like it in the region, and there's nothing like it in the country. It's all these levels of local government working together for the benefit of one another. And so that often means we have to facilitate and be a part of hard conversations from time to time, whether that's between our local units of government or whether it's between local units of government that are a little farther away, like St. Paul and the rest of the state. One of the questions that was asked is what does success look like? And I want to really put a fine point on it. I don't think it's a very hard conversation to have at all. It's about responsibility. We have a responsibility to our communities to make sure that we set the conditions for them to be able to thrive. And right now, the biggest de-risking, that word has come up many times in Rolf's presentation. The biggest thing we can do to de-risk our investment in the region is permitting reform. This state has miles to go in terms of reasonable, responsible, and accessible permitting reform. From time to time, I'll say things like, we need to be able to do two things in this state: keep our old stuff running and permit new stuff. We see examples of Mesabi Metallics being able to permit new stuff right now, and that's going to be a watershed moment in our state when we get a new taconite mine up and running. It'll be an unparalleled opportunity for us. We talk about things that are the cornerstone of our lives. Someone drew their attention to, you don't want to talk about the things in your phone, and if you can't grow it, you got to mine it. We talk about those cornerstones, but we got to talk about all the rocks under our feet. Not just some of them, all of them, including copper, nickel, hydrogen, helium. All those things are unique to our region in northeastern Minnesota, and we have a responsibility to be honest about talking about their role for us and what we can do to develop all of them in a way that benefits all of our communities. And in doing so, we can set the conditions for all of our citizens to be able to afford to live their lives in a place that they call home on the range. We have robust and ambitious climate change goals set by the state of Minnesota, but no vision on where northeastern Minnesota fits. No aggressive, you can do this. But guess what? People on the range have known where we fit forever. Just needed to ask us.
Beautiful. Thank you all. So we'll move into a first question, and Paul, it was a really nice segue around bridging perspectives. So when we do encounter, difference in perspectives or different things that we might each value, whether it's environment or jobs or climate change or economic development, where are there areas where you might see surprising common ground? And how do you imagine building trust when we do see those differences? And Paul, I'll start with you because that was a really nice segue into this question.
Having a beer with Rob Bacon. That's the first important thing. Showing up, Representative Johnson, thank you for being here from the Metro. Thank you to Cal for bringing him up. These are important things. Sharing conversations across geography. Familiarity doesn't breed contempt, it breeds trust. Being in shared space, the range is co-sited with all of the sticky, icky, wonderful, hard, awful, great conversations that we have in our state, whether it's permitting reform, mineral development, tribal relations, community development. You want to add to the list? Energy use and consumption, development for the future, legacy. We are co-sited with all of that stuff. And if any area of the state is going to be able to have the hard conversations, it will be, and it has to be the range, because we live here together. If we envelop and develop relationships, if we choose to embrace them, we will make the most of our shared future together. And that work happens in this room, in this place, with the people who are already here. Start close to home and it's easy to get the bigger circle to happen. My 2 cents.
I feel like though we recognize that that's difficult, right? I feel like we have the conversation, Bud Stone from Grand Rapids used to always say, there's this line drawn, before you get to Brainerd or St. Cloud. I can't remember where that line is drawn, where you can't go north of St. Cloud, right?
Anything north of St. Cloud's considered the Arctic Circle.
Right?
Right?
I think that's a big challenge. I think we have this sort of invisible line drawn where we struggle to attract folks to come here, to listen, to sit in a room and have a conversation. And I think part of it is really genuinely bringing them into a space where we feel like we're heard, but they're also heard. I think there's this ability for us to welcome them into our space and really show them what we're all about. And I think we talked a little bit about this earlier. It's a sense of we want them to come here. We want them to see us for who we are. And I feel like someone was talking a little bit about this earlier. Jason was mentioning that from IRRR. I think we really have to figure out this balance of I don't think we're gonna get them all to come here, right? I feel like we know this. We need to figure out how we go there. I think we need to figure out how we show up in their space and help them understand us better in a more productive way. And I loved going down with Ben and the Nashwauk crew to the cities and showing up with busloads of people and going from office to office. We used to do this with the forestry group in Grand Rapids as well. We'd show up with a busload of people and the doors would open and people would listen to us and we'd have great quality conversations. And there were very smart people in the room. I'm telling you, like scientists and foresters, people that really knew the facts. And then there were just everyday people from those communities that cared about the products and cared about the process. And they showed up just because. And when we were in the cities with the Nashwauk folks, there were lots of those people too. They were just community members that cared about that project moving forward. And I think that's the balance that we haven't found. But I do want to throw this out there as well. We have to show up in our own communities. I feel like we assume that everyone in our region is on the same page. I think that's a big assumption. I think we have to show up in our own communities consistently. I mean, I look to our tribal neighbors and we often assume that our tribal communities are all on board with a lot of the work that we're doing. And I feel like we have work to do. We have work to do in a lot of our own communities about showing up consistently, listening, carrying the message forward so we are on the same page as a region. Or maybe we're not on the same page, but we understand that and we're talking to each other about what we're not on the same page about.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, through my experience, lifelong experience in leadership, I've definitely found that small teams of leaders with a unified goal can literally change the world. And I think that's what, for myself, from my perspective, we need small groups, 12 or under, of leaders, decision makers, diverse team, city, whatever it's going to be, or whatever this chosen topic, to get together, not over too many beers or Howard Johnson's and partying in the evening, but a place where you can close the door, lock the gate, and you have 5 or 6 days and you have facilitation. And you're there, first of all, to build a relationship and respect between the team members, because without that, nothing happens. There's no communication. There's no sense of safety, vulnerability. But first you have to really break down those, and the unified goal is what makes the difference. And I would take that a step further. The business model might be a unified goal, but I would say a unified goal, a goal meaning something that's greater than yourself, not just lining your pockets. But we want to solve this particular problem. The problems that we're seeing, what's at stake, industrial transformation, jobs, a whole new vision for Ely range in Minnesota. So I really think that's one of the directions, because it's so obvious that we could shout and yell in a room like this, but we have to, first of all, get to know each other and build those relations, because after this type of a process, you have a relationship now, finally, you have a respect for someone who maybe believes something totally different than you, and that's how you start moving. I mean, one way, the community action, building constituency through education, our K-12 education is essential. I would say, that, okay, our future employees and employers are in preschool right now. We're talking about transformation. Well, we need to look at the school system too, transformation. I mean, the opportunities are, many of the opportunities, science, technology, math, engineering, at a younger age. And then there's a huge opportunity for the trades. The trades have been really underrated, especially they've been put down for 40 years in the city. And now, anyone with a trade, electrician, whatever, you have a very good paying job, you can raise a family. And I've been working in that direction in the inner city, creating the training, the jobs to get people out of poverty. It's a multifaceted how we have to do it, but I've worked 40 years on this project. I thought 40 years ago, if I could reach higher level leadership, I could make the biggest impact in my life. What did I really want to do? What legacy did I want to do? And that's why I did the North Pole 40 years ago. That launched my career as a public person, and that gave me more opportunity toward national, international, but all that was relationship building and consensus building, building policy. You have to get everyone on board, left and right. And I think this is really a good time for it. I think we're really sick and tired of the left, right, yelling at each other when actually we're all in the center. We all want these jobs. We want a future for our kids. And I think what we're talking about in this room today is that's what it's really about. It's beyond politics. It's family, it's resilience, it's sustainability, something that we can count on and have a respectful society in doing that.
Jamie did such a wonderful job of working with our panel here that I've got the next question that I get to start with first. I never get a chance to talk about the trust part of it, so we might have screwed up the order, and that's on me. But so I might have to go twice here, but I'll just go as quickly as I can talking about the trust issue. And my expertise really relies within my own reservation. And it probably applies to every tribe in the Minnesota Chippewa tribe and across the state when it comes to the trust. Historically, there hasn't been a lot of trust, especially between private industry and reservations. Now, that could mean a huge opportunity. Tribal sovereignty might be a way to accelerate permitting. It might be an avenue to explore, but we'll never get there unless there's a belief that this project or all these projects are renewable, sustainable, clean, and they don't affect the water. Water is on the tribal leadership's minds. So once they're convinced that they're protecting the environment, and this is a way to protect the environment, that this is going to happen with or without tribes, I think that's a great way to establish trust and begin a relationship and look at exercising tribal sovereignty to move this project forward. It's a possibility that needs to be explored. Okay? So that's all I got to say about trust. And then our next question is, talks about investment and accountability. Investment and accountability in a project like this is going to result in capital flowing in. And as that capital flows in, what do investors and policymakers need to be aware of about doing the work in this community, right? From a tribal perspective, St. Regis paper mill, and this is common throughout the whole Iron Range, but in Cass Lake alone, polluted and succeeded and created a great community in the city of Cass Lake from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Thriving community. They left a Superfund site. And the battle for that contaminated soil to get rid of it is still continuing today. Like they just had their 40th anniversary of it being declared a Superfund site. So the tribal members, the tribal leadership are all going to be looking at, is this going to create another Superfund site for 3, 4, up to 7 generations down the road? And that's what we need to be aware of when we're talking with tribes is what's this going to look like in the future? Is this a boom now that's going to create problems for our for future generations? Or are we just beginning to start to make a difference in getting rid of systematic and generational poverty on the reservation?
Who wants to take next?
Investment or choices?
Investment pieces.
I can speak a little bit to investment from the economic development side. I think we see a lot of larger companies coming in and I, experience with working with partners like Apex and others. There's definitely things that as a Minnesota state, we're challenged. I'm trying to say this in a nice way. We're challenged to attract companies to come into Minnesota. We have challenging environments besides permitting that we have when companies are coming in. But I think we have priorities, right? We want companies that are going to come into Minnesota that are going to invest here, but aren't just investing in bringing their companies here, they're investing in our unions, right? We have an environment that's been created for many, many decades. So we want them to understand how we appreciate our labor force being treated, not just the labor force that ends up working at those businesses, but the contractors and laborers that they're going to be working with, and the negotiations and the work that happens before the businesses ever puts a shovel in the ground. And so we want the folks that are working on these investments and these relationships ahead of time to be thinking about what it looks like to be a business in Minnesota. But we also want them to be aware that we want to be better at rolling out the red carpet. And we want our state and our state partners to look at the businesses that are on the ground as partners in recruiting those businesses. We want them to look at IRRR and Apex and others on the ground as partners and attracting those investments to our communities. So we are better equipped to attract them, because I think it will be a hard sell. It's not just about, Minnesota has the resource. Great, let's go to Minnesota, right? You think I know none of us think it's going to be easy. Let's just take that off the table. But let's just say we have resources, so it should be easy. We know it's going to be hard, and we should call upon the really amazing expertise that we have in northern Minnesota to help with that process of bringing those investments here. And I think we really need to think about that as we're building these plans. It's not just the science of research, it's the science of looking to the resources we have as a region when we're trying to attract investment.
Right. There's a lot of decisions that are in front of us in this time. And I believe that we are living in an in-between time, a time when the hydrogen tax credits were on the table, are no longer on the table. They were part of the thing that drove the flywheel for green steel moving forward. That is no longer an option for the near term. And we got to get comfortable with living in that squishy in-between time and the affordance that it provides us. It gives us an opportunity to build relationships, nurture those connections, and have an eye towards the future. I want to make sure that I thank Representative Scraba, Representative Warwas, Senator Heinzman. I see you guys in the audience today. Thank you for being here. Having the range delegation be a part of this conversation is immensely important. But also we have another statewide lawmaker, Senator Nick Frentz here from Mankato. Important to have people from not this area interested in what this is all about. So thank you for being here in your time. If I missed anyone else who's here, sorry about that. But so I'm reading this book about Rudy Perpich, and there's this lore, right, about the range, this cool, sexy thing about the characters from the past, right? And that's one of the colorful characters from our political history. And he was instrumental in establishing what was called Medical Alley. Well, I believe that we're ready for a mineral alley in northeastern Minnesota, and the range can lead on that. And if you take nothing away, think about what could Minnesota do to set us up to be the next mineral alley. We have a lot of invitations and a lot of permissions to get, but we can get it together. And my hope as being part of this MITI advisory panel is to continue to help curate that part of the conversation so we don't forget that you can't solve all the problems with all the things. Maybe you can pick one or two that do cross couple. That's great. But let's have a laser focus on achieving some outcomes together. Thank you.
And before we go to Q&A, Will, do you want to have a last word before we go to Q&A? Neil?
Yeah, last word. I'll make it short.
There you go.
Well, already out of time. Yeah, to be very what Paula said, we have to have a strong vision for what's ahead. Because the labor as we know it in the mines, the steam shovels, the trucks driving, AI, that's going to disappear. But the other opportunities that are around the corner are great. And this is what this is what the transformation is about. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I'd like to think this is the beginning of something big here.
Thank you all very much. So we'll turn it over for a few questions. Some people with mics out there. Anyone have any questions for this incredible.
You know we're
with
gonna
humans.
get lunch, right? I'm a former teacher, that's like the last, it's like the dead hole. Like junior high band right before lunch is like the worst.
Prove him wrong.
Yes, Mayor Pete Heider from Hibbing. My question is education and understanding of our region, because I've experienced many two times with legislators and many people in our state that don't understand what we do in our great area of the state. And if we don't educate, if we don't let them know the importance of what we do and an understanding that, yes, we're still doing it because some don't realize that, then we're just treading water. So we need to educate. Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that actually too. I think one of the things that many people don't realize, besides the incredible school Rockridge here in the region that is outstanding investments from our partners here in the room, there are many career pathway programs that exist in our region that exist in very few places throughout throughout Minnesota at all. So in Itasca County, for example, there's a career pathways program that have 7 different pathways, including trades programs where those students go into those industries such as manufacturers, and they actually work in those manufacturers, and the next summer may become employees of those manufacturers. So they're starting to work as they should, learning how to work in fabrication, for example, starting to work in those manufacturers while they're still in school, and then during the summer months going to work for them. So we're really starting to integrate programs between the schools and the actual businesses right now in our region. Unlike many places in the state of Minnesota, there's only a couple of other places in our state that do what we're doing in northern Minnesota. So we're really celebrating some of our programs in a significant way here.
I thank you for that answer, but I want to follow up. I know we do a great job educating in Minnesota North colleges or high schools. Educating the rest of the state is what I'm talking about. Having them understand the importance of what we do up here. That's where we're falling way short. And I think we've handled our own responsibilities outstandingly in this area, but we need the rest of the state to understand. The person that lives in a 10-block area, legislative district in downtown St. Paul or Minneapolis, to understand what we do in this state and the importance to not only our state and our region, but our country.
I'd like to build on that just a little bit, and kind of add on my previous discussion or comments earlier. We had Misabi Metallics up there earlier, and he was talking about the cell phone, that everybody loves the cell phone, but that's fine, but you've heard also of NIMBY. We still don't want to have that done in my backyard. So in other words, they can get that product somewhere else. And along with the thought that we had over here, we had a discussion of what percentage of the state even know that mining's going on up here. So when when we're having those discussions down at the Capitol, it's not adding on. People are not thinking of adding on to the mining that you're doing. They're thinking, oh my God, we're going to start mining in the middle of the boundary waters where they've never had a mine before, and we're going to destroy the water and stuff like that. So I think when you go back to the education, there has to be more education of, there's been mining going on here for decades. It's going to continue to go on. All this stuff. This is something else that we are experts at, and we're just adding on to another product, as opposed to it's never even been done before. And that's where I think people get stuck on the permitting question that we have down there. I agree, we got to get that improved. We got to get move on that. But I think it's a different discussion from, again, we've done this. It's just an add-on that we're going to be doing. We got this under control, to, oh my God, they're doing this for the first time, and we're going to destroy everything that's ever going to happen up there. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for your feedback. Thank you to these incredible human beings for your perspective and insights. And they are on all of them are on our advisory panel, as well as several others in the audience, and they are helping guide and shape this work going forward. So thank you all. We're going to break for lunch now, and I believe it's out in the hall, and then we'll meet back here at 12:30. Okay, so we move into the afternoon. So as we move into the afternoon, we're now going to shift from building and shaping the transformation into how we might accelerate this work. So to lead us through some exciting lightning talks, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Brandon Isaacson. He's the Managing Director of Industry at Fresh Energy and a key partner in advancing clean energy and industry across Minnesota. Brandon, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And as Jamie mentioned, I'm Brandon Isaacson with Fresh Energy, and I'm excited to kick off this lightning talk session. Hopefully it's a little bit stimulating after we all just had our lunch and we're trying to not fall asleep. Before we jump to it, I just want to also thank again the organizers from MITI and our IRRR for putting on this event and inspiring thoughtful engagement. Let's just give them a quick round of applause. Make sure to thank them in person when you get a chance as well. So for this next session, we have a handful of presenters from organizations that are critical to accelerating this transformation. The lightning talk session is a little bit different, as each presenter just has a few minutes to introduce themselves and their work, and hopefully that'll inspire some thoughts and questions. And I'd encourage you to follow up with the presenters afterward and engage and keep these conversations going. Okay, so I'm going to get into it. Okay, so these are the groups that are going to be speaking here, and I'm going to be kicking it off. So as I mentioned, I'm Brandon Isaacson. I'm the Managing Director of Industry for Fresh Energy. We are a nonprofit advocacy group based in St. Paul. We're focused on driving bold policy solutions for a just carbon-free future. And today I'm going to be talking briefly about our theory of change for industrial transformation. And before I get into the weeds on that, I just want to talk about the theory of the idea of change and the idea of transformation. There are many skeptics, but we believe that transformation is not only possible, but that it is inevitable. And if you look around the world, you will see that the wheels are in motion. And this is really cliche, but fitting for where we're at right here. Let's make sure that we're skating to where the puck is going. So this is a significant opportunity for Minnesota to be a leader in this transformation, and there are significant opportunities for return on that investment. A recent CARD-funded study suggested that for every $1 invested in energy efficiency, the state should see a return of around $4. And efficiency is just one part of this greater transformation, which as a whole stands to offer even more upside potential. If our efforts are properly aligned, we can strengthen our existing industry while promoting innovation and new opportunities within our borders. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we want to see industrial energy users move toward electrification as quickly as possible. It's a great way to, among other benefits, improve energy efficiency and to reduce our carbon footprint as we transition to a clean grid by 2040. Now, we understand that not all operations are easily electrified, and that's especially the case for heavy industry. In those instances, we still want to see operators electrify where possible, but where they're not able to do that, we want to see them transitioning to cleaner fuel sources. But that challenge brings up a bigger point, which is that none of this is easy, and let's not pretend that it is. Whether you're producing steel, glass, sugar beets, or beer, there are numerous hurdles to overcome. So let's make sure that we're identifying those and addressing them head on. And I will argue that policy is an important tool for doing just that. When it comes to electrification, one of the biggest challenges that we have is the spark gap. Many of you are familiar with this term, and that's the gap between the relatively high cost of electricity as compared to gas and other fossil fuels. Now, an operator might find significant efficiency improvements through electrifying a project of theirs, but they might find that they're still not breaking even or taking a loss on the cost there because of that spark gap. So that's a real challenge that we need to overcome if we're going to be promoting and encouraging adoption here. So how do we tackle that? From a policy standpoint, we're certainly focused on energy pricing and project financial support. We don't have time to get into the weeds on that here, but I do want to talk to you about it. So please catch me afterward. I want to have follow up. Technology improvements are also helping to narrow this gap. So we're taking an all tech on deck approach to support the development of emerging tech, allowing the best solutions to rise to the top. In order to do that, we need to support demonstration opportunities today. Speed and scale are important for deployment, so we need to ensure that we are aligned in our efforts. And that starts with events like this. Thank you again to our hosts. There are multiple interests represented here, and we need to rely on each other's voices and expertise to continue pushing forward and doing so together. So let's keep these conversations going, especially from a fresh energy standpoint. We want to hear your voices as we think about what we can do on the policy side. As we continue to identify and promote solutions, let's make sure that we don't stray from our guiding principles. Here is a short and incomplete list of things that we need to make sure that we aren't neglecting in our pursuit. Now, I am biased, but I believe that policy is critical to transformation. While sticking to our principles, we need to ensure that we're creating a landscape that promotes innovation and supports our industry later. We need the state and all communities within to demonstrate that they are aligned and committed to this transformation. We've already made great progress so far through recent policy efforts that have helped set this stage. Now we need to get really granular with how our policy can support the next phases of the transformation. These won't always be easy conversations, but let's keep our eye on the prize. If done correctly, we can support industry and promote economic development throughout all corners of the state, which theoretically should have bipartisan support, and that'll be important as we currently have a split legislature. So again, let's make sure that we're working together to drive this mission forward. Please catch me later to keep the conversation going. I look forward to catching up with some of you on the Mesabi Metallics tour later. Thank you again, and enjoy the next few lightning talks. And I will turn it over to Bertha Metals.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Bullard. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at excited to be here to talk about what we're doing. I'm excited what we're doing down at our pilot facility down in Conroe, Texas. We are essentially reinventing the way that steel is made. And we have developed a direct ore to steel process, single reactor vessel that produces both steel and high purity iron we can be using for other endeavors like river magnets. That's right. There we go. Let me start with the conclusion first. So we're direct ore, steel, single reactor, and lower cost, and also reducing energy emissions or greenhouse gas emissions as well. We're doing this now with a 1 ton per day plant. Selling, it just got qualified for production into rare earth magnets as well. Building off of what was talked about earlier, this is the way it's done now. Coal goes into a coking oven, becomes an electric coke, or gets fined into pellets. Pellets go into a blast furnace. Blast furnace reacts those with oxygen to form a carbon saturated iron that then needs to go into a refining furnace, and then eventually goes downstream into a process. And what we've developed at Hertha is flipping that around, right? We don't use coal for our heat source or for our reductant. We use natural gas or hydrogen for our reductant, and we use energy for our heat source. That allows us then to use any grade of ore that goes into the furnace in any shape or form. Does not matter whether it's pelletized, could be powdered, could be fines, could be anything. Like we've done this technology with low-grade ore, waste products. We've explored using red mud. Anything that has a high iron unit content in it will go through our process and work out effectively. The other nice thing about our furnace is that, again, what goes in, we can put a lot of things in, and all we're getting out is the iron. Let's see if this works. Here's our pilot facility. This is to show that we're actually doing it at scale. We're tapping out 1 ton per day, daily basis. And we're getting ready to expand into a 30 ton per day facility. We're doing a fundraiser for that right now. As we scale, we've been very methodical about doing this. We started with microdrop moment. We started in the lab. We scaled to 1 ton per day. We're actually, as I said, going out to do the 30 ton per day. The bulk of that material will be going in to support the rare earth magnet industry that's burgeoning in the U.S. Not everybody knows this, but 70% of all rare earth magnets is iron and has to be very, very high purity. We can actually develop or produce high purity here right out of the front. So there it is, flex fuel. We can use whatever we want going into it. We get 50% less emissions. We're set up. We can actually do it with hydrogen as well. We're using natural gas now. The same technology, same equipment, same everything will be suitable for hydrogen when that reduces the cost. And we have a great path to future. Questions or comments? If not, I'll be around and have them talk. I'll give somebody else. No, direct into the firms. I'll be around. Have to talk about it in more detail.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we feeling? Terrific. Wonderful food. Thank you so much. Just a really big thank you to today's event organizers, Ralph and Jamie, with the MITI team. For all hard work. I know this is a big lift to get organized, so really appreciate it. As well as Great Plains Institute. Thank you for being a co-partner in this work. My name is Greg Mast. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, or SEEM, as people refer to us. And I describe that as being kind of that tie that binds the energy efficiency and clean energy business community together. So we were founded by business leaders in 2016, and we provide a unified voice for energy efficiency and clean energy companies. And we focus on elevating the business case to accelerate the transition to a clean and sustainable energy future. Part of what I wanted to share with you today is just our belief in igniting clean energy jobs and the economic benefits that can come along with that. And today's discussion thus far has been super inspiring to me. And I felt like, as part of teeing up my brief couple of minutes with all of you, some adjectives came to mind as I was just listening to the conversations. And I think that there's curiosity, there's a lot of a respectful tone. I think that there's authenticity and there's passion in this group that's convened here today. And I just really appreciate that, because I feel like you can sense that positive energy in the room. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more about our organization and how we're focused on igniting those clean energy jobs across the state. Our mission is pretty simple. We provide educational leadership, collaboration, and policy analysis to accelerate energy market growth on our energy policies across the state. And we do that in a nonpartisan way through that really key piece of education. So we're engaging policymakers, we're engaging the public to talk about where and why clean energy jobs, and investment is really important for our state in order to be globally competitive, globally attractive. It's a place to grow, expand, and attract business to Minnesota. You can see here on our member logo slide that we're very diverse in the companies that we're proud to work alongside of in our work day in and day out. And so there's Fortune 50, 100 companies, as well as many small and medium-sized companies that are proud to call Minnesota home. We're headquartered here in the state, have significant jobs, investment, supply chain partners, or projects they're developing. So happy to talk to anyone who may also be interested in getting connected to any of our membership, but very diverse, very innovative, and are forward thinking. And I think that's what's required in this time. So our goal as an organization that our board set out and we agreed to a couple of years ago was to achieve 100,000 clean energy jobs across the state by the year 2030. some of you may be asking, well, where are we at in achieving that goal? And so today, I'm proud to share that just a couple of weeks ago, we released the state's latest clean energy jobs report, and we're at a record high for the number of clean energy jobs here in Minnesota. We're at 64,000. So that 100,000 by 2030, that's pretty ambitious, right? But we certainly know that with stable, predictable policies, with the ingenuity of our business leaders, and again, with a public that understands and the demand is there for clean, sustainable, reliable, affordable solutions, we know that that is a path that we are determined to continue to go down. And I couldn't be more, I would say, confident in our ability to, again, not only show the country, but also the world where and how Minnesota can lead in this energy transition. So this is my next to last slide. It really fits in, I think, and I'm going to reinforce a couple of themes that Rolf shared in his opening. How we're going to achieve that 100,000 jobs in the next several years. It's going to be around economic development, workforce training. I'm so proud to call Apex a partner of ours. We're collaborating with regional economic development organizations across the state who also see and they know how popular this innovative technology is. They're seeing where and how these investments in our communities and across our state, how it's positioning Minnesota, again, to be competitive. And ultimately, that goal, as I share on the bottom of that slide, is to win the future. And so we know that continuing to forge a path together in these areas that MITI is helping to lead in the areas of sector integration, the sector coupling. I've traveled with many of you to different parts of the country, as well as to some of our international partners, project locations, where we're seeing where and how they're utilizing clean electricity, pairing that, combining it with heating applications, with transportation, within buildings. That's what sector integration and sector coupling is all about. There's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be continuing to lead the nation here in the US in showing how to do that with demonstration projects and real examples. And then lastly, I'll close with this industrial symbiosis. That's just another term where you've seen it and we've discussed it in different ways already, where it's around co-locating these really big economic development projects that are undergirded with clean energy, with innovative solutions and technologies that, again, one particular business or industry's byproducts, their waste, their water, can then be in a circular economy and the circularity principles be inputs into that next process. And so that's all about having an energy system that ultimately is flexible, it's reliable, it's resilient. And I think that that goes a long way for what we all want Minnesota to be. And that's not only a clean energy leader, but it's having that affordable, reliable, energy independent, energy secure economy that we all deserve and all of our citizens deserve. So I really appreciate being here today. I'll be here the rest of the afternoon. Our Senior Policy Associate Chandra Herb. This is the rest of my team. Please reach out at any time as we forge this path ahead together. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Emmerich. Clean Counts is a client of mine, so I'm doing a presentation for them. First, gotta make sure I know how to work this thing so I don't embarrass myself. Thank you. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about clean ammonia tracking and potentially the creation of a clean ammonia certificate. But first, I'll give you a little bit of background on Clean Counts. Clean Counts is the leading market standard registry. That means is basically when you have sorry, I haven't done this in a while, so allowing customers to claim and confirm meeting voluntary and mandatory obligations. In 2007, the Next Generation Energy Act was created by Tim Pawlenty, and they realized at that time that you needed to have a way to track these renewable energy credits. Otherwise, how did you know that they were going to make the standard? So, in combination with FERC, the Minnesota PUC, the Wisconsin PUC, they created MRETs. And just recently, over the last year, MRETs had a branding transition to Clean Counts. So a clean registry basically prevents double counting by generating, tracking, and retiring certificates. So every time that you have a renewable energy credit that's created, you have a certificate, and that's given to either the person who produced it or sometimes the customer. And then when that credit or that certificate is then claimed and someone wants to say, yes, I'm using this towards my goal, you retire it. That's what Clean Counts does. And it's an important part of the process. So in addition to RECs, you also have a renewable thermal certificate, which has attributes of generating 1 decatherm of energy, including clean hydrogen, renewable natural gas, and biogas. Similar to tracking RECs, Clean Counts is looking to develop software with state-directed funds that could create a clean ammonia registry. And that software would enable the use of RECs not only behind the meter for these projects, but anywhere on Clean Count's entire grid, which last year they had tracked 400 million megawatt hours of renewable energy credits, making them the largest in North America. So how it would work is you would have 1 metric ton equals 1 clean ammonia certificate. The benefit, the benefit of being able to track through this is you capture from cradle to gate the carbon intensity data. You have credible accounting using both and claim and mass balance accounting. And so once again, you have a similar concept. A REC is created and then a REC is retired. So here you have some regulatory and market headwinds and tailwinds. And one of them in particular is out of the One Big Beautiful Bill, you had changes to the 45V and 45Q tax credits. The main one regarding clean ammonia is going to be around 45B, where you previously saw those tax credits for green hydrogen retiring in 2025. Now it's been extended to 2028, and once you are in that process, you have a 10-year payout from that. Another is we look at curtailed wind power in MISO North. We have 8 million megawatt hours annually through 2030, and we're going to see that number go up. So that's a lot of potential to be using that curtailed wind in the production of clean ammonia. You could put it in battery storage, but there's a huge opportunity to take advantage of that curtailed wind just sitting there. In addition, we have European markets that have similar programs for clean ammonia. So if you create these clean ammonia certificates, you're able to sell those markets into Europe, vice versa. As well, we also have corporate scope 3 pledges. So you could take a company like Pepsi, for example, and if they wanted to label on their packaging that they are reducing emissions, there has to be a way for them to track that. Clean ammonia going into the production, let's say, of corn, could reduce the carbon intensity of that product over time. And so, why ammonia? Why now? Well, so we look at farming specifically, and fertilizer price per ton are going up. And green ammonia, with the potential of these credits from the federal government, have the potential to rival the prices of your traditional gray ammonia or potentially blue ammonia. Basically, if you look at the carbon intensity that's created from clean ammonia, it can help reduce the overall or it can increase the value of SAF, because if you have a lower carbon intensity product going on corn that's turned into SAF, it increases the value. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Stuckey, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Conservative Energy Forum. We are a nonprofit, and we approach energy policy from a market-based, all of the above perspective. So we're a little bit of an anomaly in the energy space, but we were founded to give the center right of the aisle language to engage in the clean energy conversation through issues they already care about, like the economy, property credits, and free markets. And any real progress starts with meeting people where they're at, not where we wish they would be. And so when you speak about what actually matters to them, things can really start to move and minds can begin to change. And then for a long time, though, that hasn't been the case. And support for clean energy has mainly been focused around addressing climate change. And that often becomes a debate over beliefs, which we know devolves very quickly. Instead of a conversation about solutions. And because of that, I think we lose sight of the bigger picture, and we really need to ask ourselves, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And if our overarching goal is decarbonization, do we want to focus on winning an argument, or do we want to actually make things happen and get it done? And energy didn't used to be this polarizing. About 15 years ago, our political map looked very different here. You may remember there actually were rural Democrat districts and Republican districts in the metro area. Those have flipped, and today we see what we often call blue demand and red supply, where the biggest demand for energy and the most use is in the larger population centers that lean left, and the rural areas that lean right produce it. And so when we talk about advancing American industry, we have to talk about bridging that divide and aligning shared interests across regions and party lines to build the energy system we all depend on. And one of the biggest things that gets in the way is the idea of false choices. And so just a few examples, energy and agriculture. It's not an either or, and farmers can grow their usual crops and also feedstocks for clean fuel and host renewables that bring in new income and local tax revenue. And then with mining and the environment, they're not actually in conflict. And many of you probably know that responsible mining actually supports environmental goals when it's done here under strong standards, and Minnesota's mining legacy proves that we can do that. But it's often the same voices that are advocating for more clean energy that oppose domestic mining of the materials that those projects require. And if we're serious about scaling clean energy responsibly and achieving climate goals, we can't ignore the logistical and economic and ethical implications, especially when we outsource them overseas. Mining overseas often, especially when outsourcing mining overseas often means turning a blind eye to weaker environmental and labor standards. And then finally, permitting and environmental protection don't have to be at odds either. We all want to protect our natural resources, and maintaining high standards matters, but that doesn't have to mean delay or uncertainty. And ultimately, these aren't inherently partisan issues. And we say all the time, energy shouldn't be political anyway. And both sides have blind spots still, though. The right needs to recognize that economic growth depends on new markets, the kind created by building energy infrastructure, and that includes wind and solar. And the left needs to acknowledge that overly complex and unpredictable permitting, along with restrictions on which carbon-free energy sources we can use, more and more now will stand in the way of the progress we're trying to achieve. And once we move past this either or way of thinking, we have a massive opportunity to build a circular economy, which some others have talked about today too, that strengthens our entire industrial base. And that could look like sourcing and refining materials up in this area, establishing new markets for local green ammonia and hydrogen, manufacturing and assembly, building, and then recycling materials right here at home. And so this is really the opportunity in front of us, as long as we have the policies and regulatory systems that make it possible to build here and not just plan. And that starts with clarity and predictability. Along with that, we need long-term energy framework that doesn't swing wildly depending on who's in charge. When we talk with project developers about working in Minnesota, they tell us they don't like high costs, but they can deal with it, but they cannot deal with the unpredictability and chaos. And so For years, Minnesota's also been one of the most difficult states in the country to permit in. And we know we have the talent and resources to lead in shaping the future of American industry. We just need to make it make sense to invest here. And then I will go over these, but just some areas that we work in. And then at the end of the day, advancing industry starts moving past these false choices and building pragmatic market-based pathways that align align Minnesota's energy and economic goals through policies that keep pace with innovation and position Minnesota to lead what's next. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for those really inspiring talks. And thank you to Fresh Energy for coordinating that segment. So just to contextualize us within the broader agenda of the day, we started by kind of getting grounded in the current reality in the region with DIRRR. We talked about the future direction or possibility through the MITI update. We heard from industry leaders and a community panel talking about where industry is heading and how community can help shape that. And then we heard those inspiring lightning talks on some work that's being done to accelerate this transformation. Now, we're going to head into some breakouts unless there's a desire for any immediate questions, or we can also take 10 minutes for just general Q&A if anyone has any statements, comments anyone wants to make. Otherwise, we'll break into groups and discuss in smaller breakouts. If anyone has any questions, though, we can pass the mic around as well. Hi, I'm Alana from the State Energy Office. I have a question for Bertha. What's the catch? Thank you. But what's new? Like, it seems like this is a magic wand type of solution. So something's new.
Yeah, I would love to tell you more, but we can't, right? Because we're starting up and we're trying to make sure we get a right in place. Suffice it to say, right, we're producing 1 ton per day with this technology at a facility in Conroe. We're out raising money to build a 30 ton per day plant and support the high-purity iron industry. We're going to supporting the railroad magnets. Our vision is much larger than that. We want to create a steel producer.
Another question for Hertha. When you say fines, how small are we talking, like 40, 325? What kind of microns are you talking, and what grade iron and silica?
Doesn't matter. We can use lump. We can use stuff as fine as flour. It's a liquid process. Within it's melted, and then we our magic happens. And we're agnostic to the amount of silicon that's in the system. We add fluxes to the process. Silicon is one of the fluxes. No. Road trip to Texas. We love to. We would love to host.
Okay, if there are no other questions, Mike, did you have a question?
Thank you. I just want to offer an observation, and I shared this with Jamie a bit ago. But an organization that's well respected and that has been working on the future of climate uses generally accepted models, and they projected out in the year 2019 that global warming was going to hit 8.8 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. and that was in 2019. They've upgraded their estimates to this year and found that it's dropped from 8.8 down to 6.0. And my point with that is that people around the world are using these kind of opportunities to make a real difference for our kids' future. These are opportunities today that can continue to make progress in that vein. And I don't think that the story also often gets told about how much progress has been made. This was the low-hanging fruit. The harder part is coming. But there is real hope if we can embrace the opportunities that are being presented here. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll break it out. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, to your point, we had an explosion a few years ago. The Hungatonga volcano exploded into our atmosphere, throwing water and mineralization from the water all the way into space. This was 115 megatons of water vapor that was put into the atmosphere, terrifically increasing the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. After this happened, we saw an increase in the temperature around the world. After about 2 years, I just was with the leading scientists in this area recently. And I brought up the point that I'd already expected the temperature of the Earth to start falling farther than it already had, because the precipitating out of all this excess water into the atmosphere. And this is huge, 150 megatons. And he said, let's give it a few more months. And we have seen the temperature fall in this recent period, in confluence with a decrease in water vapor in the atmosphere. Earth science is not simple. And it's nice to congratulate ourselves and think we solved problems that maybe we're looking at the wrong places sometimes. So this was very important occurrence.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move into our breakout sessions now. You'll see that there are 6 easels with notepads on them around the room. We have 3 prompts on the screen. I'm going to ask my NRI colleagues to help us divide into these among these 6 easels, and we'll have about 10 minutes for discussion, and then we'd love to hear thoughts back in the room when we come back together. So if NRI colleagues could help kind of get tables at their easels. Thank you.
Or 2 pieces of feedback or something that stood out to you or something that is exciting you in each of the groups. I think we'll actually start right back here in this corner. Timothy White. 1 or 2, Vicky, please. 1 or 2 things that from your group discussion that you'd like to share with the group.
I think, like in most groups in the room, we did not follow the directions particularly well. We had a lot of great conversation though. And one of the really cool opportunities that we talked about, as well as a risk, it's 2 sides, is about diversification of our economy, right? So it is a big risk for our area. We're talking a lot about mining today, but these opportunities in co-locating complementary industries is really a huge opportunity that ties in with MITI. And we talked about, this concept of innovation being a driver, and jobs are the side effect. A lot of times in economic development, we push jobs. And this feels a little different in that we're saying, let's push innovation, let's push what we can do together as community, as a state, as experts in our fields, and the jobs will come.
I'm gonna move around the room here. Bailey, is it you or someone in your team? One or two things you'd like to share? Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about, we kind of circled back to a lot, is education. How do we educate our communities, not just in our school systems, but how do we start to pick away at last bullet point here, when we talk about different issues, how do we educate and how do we pick away at some of that low hanging fruit? It's a big issue, permitting some of these different things. How do we create smaller subsets of people that can then take the responsibility and accountability to really work on these issues and not just leave this conversation today and have that be it? So how do we start picking away at those things rather than just seeing it as one big problem? How do we start tackling it? So, appreciation.
Right, thanks, Steve. We had a very interesting, heated discussion just a little while ago, but here are some of the things that have come up in our discussion session. In terms of the first point, it was more of communication, spreading the message, engaging in education, informing the people of what we are doing just the right way, and an individual engagement of us talking with others. So proper communication was a big part of the first point. For the second, it was addressing the future viability of industry in terms of permitting costs and other things, but particularly in terms of permitting. And thirdly, what possibilities or what opportunities can we bring forward? One of which was to meet with each other in meetings like that. And another big part was engaging with the state legislators, informing them this is what we believe in. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. We talked about a lot of stuff at our group, as I'm sure all you did too. I think one of the things that threads through all of this is the concept of trust. And so part of it for us is trusting in each other that we've got each other's backs and we can call each other out a little bit when we see each other making mistakes, but also like leveraging the trust that we have with everyone back at home, whether that's in the Twin Cities or in Rochester or Duluth or Virginia or wherever. How do we leverage the trust we've got to tell the people who are not in this room every single time what's going on? And that MITI is something that Cal Warwas agrees in, that Cure Minnesota agrees in, that Apex agrees in. Like all of us are on the same page for different reasons, but trust us. And then from the MITI standpoint, help us make that clear. Help us. We need clear, repeatable messages about the early wins, about the continued wins. Help us signal boost the awesome stuff that's happening in these rooms so that our communities are ready when MITI happens and the shovels are in the ground. They aren't surprised and they aren't gathering at city council meetings, ready to take up pitchforks.
So similar discussions, we're talking about how we might host generation, storytelling, video, social shorts, how we might really inform on the removal of obstacles and look at, we talked a lot about permitting as most of us have, I think today. Really talk about what MITI could do to get things done and their, we would like to understand actively what that research advocacy investment looks like so we can help support that out in the community. And then, apologies, we moved into number 2 and we really never got further than number 2, but this is where we went into action. We talked about an opportunity for the state of Minnesota and MITI to work together on leveraging some federal funding dollars that exist today for mining and think about being to be a place where you could funnel some big mining dollars into pilot mining products. We were really inspired by one of the entrepreneurial sort of businesses here today and thought, what if Minnesota did some of the work they were doing in ag and healthcare and other sectors that they've done where they brought in large funds from grant programs and then funneled those out to pilot projects. And they did something similar in mining. We feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurial mining pilot programs in this room, in this region that could really benefit from a program like that. And we thought, hey, why not advocate for that today? And we happen to have a legislator in our group and we really hope that he takes that message with him. Thanks.
I'll take care of that later, Julie. So we had some great conversations, not heated like in the other corner of the room, but we just talked about a few different things with facilitating tough conversations. We have people at our table that do that a lot and know how to do that well. Happy to leverage that for this effort going forward. We talked about increasing workforce opportunities and the tax base and all of those sorts of things because we were sort of rooted in our communities here in this group. And then we talked a little bit an opportunity as Paul Mineral Alley. We'd really like to, be helping that move forward with a nice community benefit agreement around that and how some of that wealth, I heard it mentioned earlier here, wealth stays here in our community and isn't extracted. And then we talked a little bit about not waiting 2 more years to have a good conversation like this right here on the Iron Range and continuing to move this forward with great tangible next steps to start extrapolating out that big, huge state with all of the things all over the state into practical next step instead of theoretical conversations.
So we covered a lot of things that you've already heard from other groups, so I'm not going to repeat those. We actually didn't get through the first prompt before we took a break, and we never really advanced. We got to the point where he said, how might you be able to help move this vision forward? And I asked the group, what about this vision? And they kind of went, what vision? So here's a little homework for, I don't know, Wall Front, but the MITI group is to come up with a better articulation of what the vision is and what it means, what it comes from. We settled on this general question, what's the why for MITI? What's the driver? What are the prompts? What do we need to get out there to say, we need this? This has to be done. This is the way. And we talked quite a bit about, as I said, a lot of the things that other people have brought up. The second part of this is why not? Why is this the time to do it? Why not 20 years down the road where resources are starting to dwindle? And then we talked about why here. Industrial transformation. When we set out to develop MITI, I think we always had a vision that this was going to be a lab for development that could be a global template. So obviously, the last thing is we need to distinctly articulate this set of whys. That's my message.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in that breakout, and thank you for sharing your feedback. We are going to take this back with us, and the MITI team is going to look at what you wrote in more detail. I think I'm turning it back to, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Tiny table in the middle. There you go. Who's going to be brave?
A couple things. A lot of this was focused on education. I think we sort of started focusing on the risks, talking about the risk acceptance, local acceptance of developments, a range of different kinds of products, including projects, including transmission, misinformation. We talked about the risks related to delays, especially as we're thinking about bringing businesses or getting investments to happen. Those delays can be very difficult, especially when we're competing with other markets or the expectations of investors in those companies, permitting financing and culture clash in particular. We've experienced a lot where companies from outside Minnesota or outside northeastern Minnesota come in proposing to do something, get what feels like an extremely cold welcome that they were not expecting and immediately want to leave. And so some of that is, some of that's just maybe them understanding better where they're coming to, would be better. And some of it's the kind of greeting that they get. Specifically around Gibbs, there was a talking about needing for people to get to know each other. A lot of the focus was on better communication amongst people from different perspectives, including up in northeastern Minnesota. One of the biggest comments from the group was that it's not just a question of what everyone here thinks versus what people in the cities think, that there's a lot of diversity of opinion in Northeast Minnesota, in Ely, right, in Duluth, Iron Range, et cetera, and that we might need to do some work here locally first to make sure that we get people more on the same page, rather than assuming it's just sort of a Twin Cities problem. And we talked about opportunities, including opportunities in education and, sixth grade curriculum. Like how much do people actually know about how this works? Are people growing up knowing this? A point was made that people growing up on the Iron Range often don't know anything about mining if they're not personally connected to it, right? So obviously unsurprising that outside the Iron Range, people don't know enough. I think that's it.
Jamie and Ralph, I think we're turning it, Ralph, to you to close it out for the day.
Well, first of all, I think we'll start everything with a thank you, and I'll probably end with a thank you. But a couple of observations of listening to some of the conversations of just thank you. I think we all came together, we learned a lot. The thing I particularly like to look around the whole crowd here is not everybody has a lot of white hair. We had a mixture of hair color here, which I think is a really, really important thing because it's also talks about ownership. And we got people from across the region and across age groups all thinking about something. And that is really nice to see. And a couple of things I just wanted to share as we close a bit. This is Minnesota's time to do something. The whole country is watching this state right now. As we showed those maps up there, it's all here. If we have the wherewithal to get past what we've got in front of us to go get that done. The rest of the nation wants it to happen here. But they also say, yeah, good luck. Just honest. So how do we address that together? I think that's something we should be walking out of here with this is where we gotta go. So Minnesota is poised. The partnership and coalition, collaboration, those words we had bumping around here, those are the ones that are gonna make us get this done. It's not gonna be any one of us doing it. It's gonna be a big room, bigger than this one. The tent's gotta keep expanding. We gotta put, and like Joe said, it's easy to point. It's not happening because of, but you got these three annoying fingers pointing back at yourself, right? Let's pay attention to those three. Couple other comments. There were some comments about, how do we do all this in a way that's responsible? That word got kicked around. Respectful. I think our panelists, came up and said it's about the water. That's one of our biggest conversation points around here. How are we doing that? Are we being responsible, but we're also being respectful? When you look at the flow of what we've got here in this state, we have ecosystems that furnish natural resources. We want to take those natural resources, we want to refine them. We want to make materials out of those resources that create an economy, that creates revenue, that supports communities that have to reinvest in our ecosystems. We got to remember that connection. That's how it's going to work. And that triple bottom line of people, planet, profit is a focal point I think we've seen and heard from a number of the conversations today. The last point, it'd be kind of, education is a big piece of this. But I had an old teacher a long time ago that says education is half listening and half talking. God gave us two of these and one of these. And that's one of the things I think we started in here today. We started the last time we had a conversation like this, but we got to get better and better and better at that. Because education isn't, I don't think somebody in your submission to agree with you. It's about reaching the place where you can get something done. So it's complex, it's detailed. I'll share that I'm personally, and I think speaking for the MITI team, we're humbled by all of you coming here. This is an investment of serious time and energy. I'd like to thank our panelists and presenters for taking the time to do this. And our NRI crew here, they've done this several times. It's getting to be almost second nature. But Jamie, Jenny, Jeremy, I got to let Chase, Mark and Michelle. Just things happen. because you got great people. And just want to make sure we acknowledge them. One thing, if anything's resonated with you here today, probably several things. The Minnesota Climate Action Framework is still looking for insertions into it from you, us citizens. There's not a lot of comment about what we talked about today in that conversation. So as you think about some of the things that you've heard today, I strongly urge you to go tap into that. Are we sitting with? There we go. If you want more information, hit the website for MITI. It happens to reside on our website because it's a simple place to put it. But keep connected, keep aware. None of us are going to have the answer by ourselves. I just want to point out one thing that's extremely rare, that there's actually 2 Rolfs in the room today. So how often does that happen? A 4-letter word, good friend, older brother, younger brother, I don't know, Rolf Nordstrom here from TPI. So it's a great pleasure to have all of you here. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the engagement. Drive safely. Have a great day. Those of you that are going to be joining the conversation and the trip with Southern Italics, Charles, I'd like you to come up and kind of give logistics or the pep talk or whatever